And so that is where we're headed today. We're going to start the conversation of the people side of the business. And I will tell you, like pretty much anything else in life, this business is easy until you involve people. And then it gets complex. And then it gets messy. And the downside about the stuff we've done so far with the real estate stuff is it can be super nitpicky. But there's always a right answer when it comes to the real estate side of things. Some of you are going to hate the next thing I'm going to say. Guess what? The answer is always going to be to every question when you start dealing with the people side of things. What should you do? What should you say to this person? What should you tell them? What should you disclose to them? What do you think the answer is literally always going to be? And it's a frustrating, maddening answer, but what it is going to be the answer. What do you think that's going to be?
Disclose, disclose, disclose.
Well, I wish it was
Everything.
that straightforward.
I'll find out.
Everything?
How about it depends?
Oh,
That is going to be the answer to every single question you're going to have to think about for the next couple of weeks. It depends, because everything becomes situational when you get people involved in the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes taking a test so much harder. Because folks, I hate to tell you, there are no right answers for these questions and there are no wrong answers for these questions. There's always what?
a better answer.
It depends.
Better.
It
depends.
It depends. And so you've got to step back, and there is no memorization in what we're going to talk about for the next 2 weeks. Memorization is out the window. This is going to all be about thinking about the full situation and thinking about, okay, who am I supposed to be representing here? What does it mean to represent them? What does it mean to look after them? And that's why this section of the class can drive people crazy. Because when you start to talk about agency, which is what the terminology is for working with people, agency can be truly, it can be really interesting as a topic. I love it as a topic. But for students in pre-licensing classes, this is when you're going to need a margarita at the end of every day. You might need one at lunchtime. You might need 3, because you're going to have to continually remind yourself, it depends, it depends, it depends. And here's the sad truth. It's going to depend on about 10 different things at one time to get the right answer to these questions. Agency is complex. There's no way around it. It is a super complex topic. And so we have to kind of go into it understanding this is not going to be straightforward at all. But
so having said that, it's something that you need to go into very open-minded and know, if it doesn't make sense, that 9 times out of 10, you're putting yourself in that position.
That's it. And that's I think Seth makes a great point. Just because it's not a straightforward topic doesn't mean it has to be nearly as complex as you make it, because agency boils down to one thing. And you can either make peace with this idea early on and you'll be a lot better off, or you can make peace with it a lot later on and you'll be a lot worse off. Agency has nothing to do with closing a transaction. Agency has
nothing to do with who pays you.
It has nothing to do with who pays you. Agency has nothing to do with making a deal. Agency has nothing to do with getting something under contract. Agency is protection. And folks, one of the things you're going to have to learn to accept in this section, and hopefully throughout the rest of your career, is that we do not protect everybody we work with. We only protect the people who actually hire us to protect their best interest. And here's what I mean by that. I have a listing at Lake Gaston. I was hired by the seller to represent the seller's best interest. Is everybody with me on that? Who am I supposed to be looking out for in the transaction?
Seller?
The seller. Is it going to be necessary for me to deal with a buyer in order for that transaction to happen?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course. How could we possibly have a transaction if we don't have the other side of that transaction? Everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
Is showing the buyer that property part of necessarily dealing with a buyer for that transaction?
Yeah.
Yes.
Depends.
How else are they going to see the property?
Mhm.
Somebody's got to show it to them.
You.
It's a necessary part.
Yes.
Is getting an offer on paper a likely necessary part of that transaction to get us to closing?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So if the buyer wanted to make an offer, would it be appropriate for me to sit down with the buyer and help them accomplish their goal of making an offer? Would that be
Yes.
appropriate?
Yeah.
Yes. Am I working for them?
No.
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 Mm-mm.
No, no, no. They didn't hire me. I don't give a crap that they're sitting in front of me. I don't care about them. I don't care about their family. As a matter of fact, y'all want to get down to brass tacks? What does agency mean? I have one job as far as that buyer is concerned: to absolutely bury them in this transaction. Because I work for who?
The seller.
The seller, folks. I don't work for that buyer. Am I supposed to help them negotiate a good price from the buyer's perspective?
No.
Yeah.
No.
No, you get the
Oh,
I'm
seller.
supposed to drive that price as high as I possibly can, because the answer of should I help the buyer is, well, it depends. And in this case, what does it depend on? Who
Who's
do
paying?
you work for?
Seller.
Absolutely.
And that is what you have to start to bring your brain around to, folks.
Yes.
Do
Put
not-
yourself in the shoes of the seller. If
That's
Travis was
it.
representing you, would you want him to help that buyer?
And so what is agency? Agency is representation. Agency is not putting a deal together. Agency is looking out for the best interest of the person who has hired us in the transaction. Agency is the relationship that we only have with people who have hired us. And folks, they have to actually hire us. If I show a buyer a property, am I representing that buyer?
No.
No, because they have not what?
Hire you.
They haven't hired me. They haven't hired me at all. So I don't represent them. I don't work for them. Now, here's an even tougher question, because you need to bring your brain around to this early in the process. Am I probably going to bother to show a property to anybody if I don't feel like I would get paid?
No, you
Yeah.
have to.
No. I can't get paid unless I get hired, correct?
Correct.
So if I'm showing a buyer a property and the buyer hasn't hired me, who has hired me?
Seller.
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 The seller must have. Otherwise, I would not be there. I would not be there if somebody had not hired me. And if the buyer didn't, then who must have?
The seller.
Seller.
Seller. And folks, it doesn't matter that I'm there showing the buyer the property. Whose best interest am I looking out for during that showing?
The seller.
The seller, because they hired me. And that's what agency is. And and listen, do I scream it because I'm mad? No, I scream it because I know you have these barriers in your brain and they have to be knocked down and they have to be forcibly knocked down. This stuff is not going to sit well with you because you've operated under 1,000 wrong assumptions about how real estate agents are supposed to operate up to this point. And the only way I know to get past all that is to tear it down.
And you know what? It's sad because a lot of times you'll scream this stuff and think it's getting through. And then we have our exam and we see the very one that we warned people about trip people up. So
For sure. For sure. So when you talk about agency, here's what the relationship I always want you to go back to in your mind. The most classic example of an agency relationship is not a real estate agent. Look at this picture. What's the most classic example of an agency relationship?
a lawyer.
Lawyer.
Attorneys. Attorneys have an agency relationship with their client. Folks, I want you to think about how that transaction plays out, how that case plays out. Do defense attorneys have to work with the prosecution?
Yes.
Of course they do.
Yes.
There we go.
But do they ever do anything that would help the prosecution? Or do they
Yeah.
only work with the prosecution to the extent required to look out for the best interest of their client, the defendant? Which one is it?
Second one.
Bare
To
minimum.
look
Second
out
one.
for their
The
defendant.
bare minimum.
Yeah.
The bare minimum. And anytime they find an advantage, do they take an advantage?
Yep.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yes.
absolutely.
They do. That is the classic example of an agency relationship, is the attorney-client relationship. In this case, the attorney is a licensed professional. Folks, that's no different than us. We are also going to be, you are going to be a licensed professional. And in the event that someone hires you for your expertise, you're supposed to look out for that person's best interest. Here's the other thing I want to point out to you. Just like attorneys sometimes get paid by their clients, but not always. Not always. If you're suing a cigarette manufacturer as an attorney, who's your client? Is your client the cigarette manufacturer, or is your client the person whose mama died from lung cancer?
Mama.
The person whose mother died from lung cancer. Is your client likely to be compensating you in that situation, or are you hoping to obtain compensation from your opposition, depending on how this thing comes out?
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm hoping that
Your
$1 billion
opposition.
company pays me.
You're hoping to get paid by the cigarette manufacturer who you're actually working against in the transaction, in the case. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
That's the other thing you have to realize about a real estate transaction. It doesn't matter where our compensation comes from. We get paid by whoever we get paid by, but we still only get hired by the people that we're representing. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And we only look out for the best interest. We don't look to where's our money coming from and say, oh, that's who I'm going to look out for. We look to where we have a relationship, where we have an agreement. I mean, I love sports analogies. Sports is a great example of agency. You look at a head coach. That's a licensed professional who's been hired to look out for the best interest of his clients, right? Or her clients. And so, and by the way, I got to update this. No more Roy. And we're sad. We're sad about that. We'll see how Hubert works out. But this is an agency relationship. Here's the thing you need to understand about agency, though. Just because a professional has been hired, does that mean we have guaranteed a positive outcome every time?
No.
No. And here's the thing. even though it does not necessarily always result in a positive outcome, is it still probably a good decision to have a professional in charge making those recommendations and giving that advice? Because more often than not, you end up with a better result. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
But do professionals make mistakes that their clients ultimately pay for?
Yeah.
Yes.
What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yes,
For
Yeah.
sure.
for
For
sure.
sure.
You humans.
That's going to show up on a test, folks, and you're going to answer it wrong because you, up to this point in your life, and I don't mean this as an insult, you've been childish. Here's the question that's going to show up on the test. Travis, the listing broker, misrepresents, meaning gives wrong information, the square footage of his listing at Lake Gaston. Who could legally be held responsible for this misrepresentation? And on the test, they're going to give you these answer choices. They're going to say, nobody, because the buyer should have measured it themselves. That ain't the answer. They're going to say, well, Travis should be held responsible because he's a licensed professional. That's one of the answer choices. They're going to say, well, Travis should be held responsible, but so should his office because somebody from his office should have caught his mistake. That's another answer choice. And then there's going to be yet another answer choice that says, well, Travis should be held responsible because he's a licensed professional and his office should also be held responsible because they should have caught the mistake as well. And the seller is also going to be held responsible. Which answer do you think is correct legally, folks?
Travis.
The last one.
The last one, because when we hire a professional, we are taking on responsibility for the actions of that professional. If they screw up, if we screw up as licensees, our clients can be held responsible for our actions. Don't forget that. Is that first of all, is that a big responsibility to bear? That
Absolutely.
what we do and say in a transaction can be held against our clients, not just us and not just our firm, but our clients. That's a huge responsibility.
That's a very big responsibility. And you know what? It's like something that people don't really get. Like, they're like, how would the client be responsible? They didn't mess up.
Well, that's exactly right. And you're right. The client didn't mess up, except they did. They hired the wrong professional. And that's where the responsibility comes in. See, that's why people really should be careful. When people say, my real estate agent's not very good, I'm sitting there thinking, and then why do you want them representing you? Because if they screw up something, you might get sued for their screw up. How many members of the public do you think realize that could possibly happen to them? Realize that they
Not a lot.
Even if they do not.
Very few, very few. And it's one of the dangers of an agency relationship if we're not super careful with that. So what is a real estate agent? Now that we've kind of introduced this idea of agency, which is representation, looking out for the best interest, and it's that relationship between a client and an agent. What specifically is a real estate agent? It is just someone who has been licensed to provide advice in one specific area. And that specific area is real estate. Okay. So a real estate agent, and really we don't have such a thing in North Carolina. Everybody in North Carolina is either a provisional broker or a non-provisional broker. We talked about those statuses, those categories, right? So the term agent is sort of a generic one. You'll also hear me say licensee when I refer to that. In some states, they refer to them as salespersons or brokers, but agent is just sort of a generic term for somebody who has a real estate license in good standing. A real estate agent in our context just means anybody who has a real estate license in good standing in any state. That doesn't mean they're licensed. Just because they're licensed in any state does not mean they can practice in all the states. But if someone has a real estate license in Nevada, for example, they are still a real estate agent. They may not be licensed to practice in North Carolina, but they are licensed to practice somewhere. Does that make sense for everybody? So when I say agent, what I really mean, what I'm referring to is just someone who has a real estate license. So don't let terminology confuse you. Now, as far as the differentiation between a broker and a salesperson on the national, now notice this does not have the North Carolina flag here. And this is going to be really important distinction to make. North Carolina is very different. The way we issue real estate licenses is very different. Obviously, I am much more concerned that you know North Carolina laws for obvious reasons, because you're getting a North Carolina real estate license. But I also have to make sure you're prepared for a national section of the exam. So on a national section of the exam, you may see the words broker and salesperson. Okay, broker and salesperson. In a state that has salespersons, that's the same thing as our provisional broker. So whenever you see salesperson, just equate that to our what? What is that?
Provisional broker.
And you remember, provisional broker is somebody who can only practice real estate with what?
With a bit.
With supervision, right? They need a broker in charge. So on the national section of the exam, when they talk about salespersons, just think of them as the provisional broker. But when you see broker on the national section of the exam, think of our broker in charge. For example, Virginia is a state that has salespersons and brokers. The people they refer to as salespersons are people who cannot use their license unless they are actively supervised. And the people who provide the supervision, what do we call them if you're in one of those states?
Broker.
They're simply called the broker. The broker. Now in North Carolina, that doesn't work, because in North Carolina, everybody's a what? Broker. And so that's why we put the little in charge tag on somebody. If everybody's going to be a broker, we need one of these brokers to be what?
In charge.
In charge of this office. And that's literally all the title means. It means here's an office of brokers that have decided to work together, and one of them is what?
In charge.
In charge. Okay. So that's the terminology difference that you're going to see between the national section and the state section. Now, this is just kind of a reminder. In North Carolina, a firm is not necessarily a group of brokers. A firm could consist of one agent or 20. I cannot stress that enough, folks. A firm could be one agent, it could be two agents, it could be 20 agents, it could be 200 agents, because a firm has nothing to do with the number of people that work there. What is a real estate firm in North Carolina?
A business entity.
A business
company.
entity or company, right? A real estate firm in North Carolina is a business entity or company. That could either be, this is tested. This is heavily tested on the thing, especially when you get to the North Carolina section of the exam. What is a firm? Well, a firm is just a business entity, okay? And that could be a corporation, that could be an LLC, that could be a partnership. All of those are examples of firms or entities that would need a firm license. Okay, everybody all right with that?
Yeah. So Coldwell Banker is a firm.
Well, that's interesting that you asked that, Elizabeth, and you bring up a really interesting question. Is Coldwell Banker a firm? The answer to that question, interestingly enough, Elizabeth, in North Carolina is no. It's even bigger than a firm. It's a brand. So here's what Elizabeth asked. She said, and I'm going to expand it. Is Coldwell Banker a firm? Is RE/MAX a firm? Is EXP a firm? Is Century 21 a firm? In North Carolina, here's how it works, folks. Every individual office is going to be its own separate firm. So Coldwell Banker Strickland Road in Raleigh is a firm, but Coldwell Banker Chapel Hill is an entirely separate what?
Firm.
Firm. Every individual office is going to be its own business entity if it is a business entity, and therefore will be its own separate what?
Firm.
Firm. And we need to connect that back to something that we learned in either, I think it was 1.2. You know, a firm is any business, any company that has a real estate license. So I know you're getting to this, Travis. Each individual place that might have the Coldwell Banker brand or Keller Williams is going to have a different business entity behind that physical office.
So here's the way I like to think of it, because Seth is exactly right. Think of McDonald's. McDonald's is a brand. Can we all agree that McDonald's is a brand and not a restaurant?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? And can we all agree that every individual McDonald's location is probably owned by different people,
Yes,
number
That's
one,
true.
Mhm.
and managed by different people? Those locations are not managed by McDonald's. They are owned and operated and managed by a franchisee who simply paid McDonald's a boat ton of money to put those golden arches on the front door. Does that make sense for
Agreed.
everybody?
Correct. Mhm.
And that is exactly, folks, how it works in our business with brands like Remax or Keller Williams or Century 21 or Coldwell Banker. Those offices that you see on the corner in your hometown that have the Remax logo on there, that's not a Remax office. What it is somebody who owns, it's a local person who has a business as a real estate company, and they paid Remax to put that hot air balloon on the side of the place because they wanted to use that brand. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, and you know,
Totally
Travis,
what
something
you-
else that you had mentioned in class last time was that, you know, if you have a bad experience at McDonald's, Strickland Road, just an example, are you going to refer that to the same one that you experienced in Cary?
Well, that's it. If you get a bad hamburger and you feel sick from McDonald's on Wade Avenue in Raleigh, are you going to go to McDonald's in Cary and demand to speak to the manager and say, I
Or
ate
another one.
here last week? Well, not really here. I ate at the one in Raleigh. What is the manager of the McDonald's in Cary going to tell you if you start griping to them about getting sick from McDonald's hamburger in Raleigh?
Go
Go
talk to the
ahead,
people
yeah.
there. Raleigh.
They'd be like, go over there. I run this store. This one. Did you get sick here? No. Get out of my face. And real estate offices work in exactly the same way. And so that manager who runs that one McDonald's, what would their title be in that one real estate firm, that one location?
Broker in charge.
In charge.
They would be the broker in charge. And right there, by the way, you just learned the license law rule. How many McDonald's locations do you think that Mandy can manage? She is the manager of McDonald's. Is she going to be the manager of 6 different McDonald's locations, or is she the manager of a McDonald's location?
Just one.
One.
A, singular. Here's a license law rule that we haven't talked about yet. How many physical locations can a broker in charge manage in North Carolina?
One.
One.
One. That's it. Because you are a broker who's affiliated with this office, and this office you are in charge of.
I just want to go ahead and take care of any sidetrack thoughts right now. That can't be a physical office right here and one right beside it. It's got to be that one physical location.
That's right. That's it. You are physically in charge of that location and all the brokerage that happens there. That's what the broker in charge title is. So I think we sometimes make that more than it really is, but that's all it boils down to. So here's a question for you all, because this is where you got to open your brain up and think about it, because this is the kind of stuff that you don't realize your brain does to you, but it's going to happen on the test. I want y'all to look at the picture you see here. Is this in the picture a sole proprietor or a real estate firm? Which is it?
We don't know.
Oh,
Could be both.
proprietor.
Oh,
We don't know.
How about don't know? Could be both.
Yeah. We don't know.
Oh, true.
Because whether or not it's a sole proprietor or a firm has nothing to do with the fact that there's only what?
One person.
One
One
person.
person there.
What we don't,
Right.
what we need to know is are the commission, and there you go, it depends. That's exactly right. What we need to know is if the commission, so let's just say his name is Sam. If the commissions are paid directly to Sam, is he a sole proprietor or is he a firm?
Sole proprietor.
Proprietor.
Sole proprietor.
But if the commissions are paid to Sam's Realty LLC, and then Sam's Realty LLC pays Sam, is he a sole proprietor or is he a firm?
He's a
Firm.
firm.
He's a firm. Does everybody see the difference?
Yes.
Okay. And so
Very imperative.
it's
to grasp.
huge. It's huge to get that in your brain that the number of people does not determine whether it's a sole proprietorship or a firm. We don't know because we don't know his business structure. It's all about the business structure.
I'm very happy that everybody got that though, for the most part, because man, usually it is all over the place.
Exactly. So now look at this picture. Based on this picture, is this a sole proprietor or is this a real estate firm? And I'll just go ahead and tell you. So here's our broker in charge right here. We'll just label her. There's our broker in charge. So based on this picture, is this a sole proprietor or is this a real estate firm? And I'm talking about the whole group of people. Are they operating as a sole proprietorship or are they operating as a firm?
You don't know.
So now we got some mixture.
We got some
Sole
mixture on that
proprietor
one,
and
and this is why I
person.
go through this exercise. It's the same answer as the previous screen, folks.
Has
It
nothing to do
depends.
with how many people stand up there.
We don't
We don't know.
know. If this is Sarah
Hey, Sarah.
and all the commission checks are paid to Sarah, and then Sarah pays these other people who are affiliated brokers with her, is she operating as a sole proprietorship or is she operating as a firm?
Everybody.
We don't
Sole
know. She
proprietor.
can do both.
If the commission
It's a
Sole proprietor.
It's a sole
Sole
proprietor.
proprietor.
She can pay by.
If the commissions are paid directly to Sarah and then she
Sole
pays the
proprietor.
other people, that's a sole proprietorship.
Yes.
A firm, they would have to be paid to the firm, right?
But if the commissions are paid to Sarah's Realty LLC rather than Sarah, and then Sarah's Realty LLC pays these people, including Sarah, by the way, is it a sole proprietorship or is it a firm?
It's a firm.
Firm.
Firm. Folks, it's all about the business structure. We don't know. We don't know at all without knowing the business structure. Does that make sense for everybody?
It's seriously better. And go ahead. No.
Repeat the sole proprietorship statement that you said a second ago. Somebody else was speaking.
So sole proprietorship has nothing to do with the number of people involved. Could a sole proprietorship have 100 real estate agents working for it?
Yes.
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 Mhm.
As long as the commissions are paid to how many of them?
One.
One sole individual who would also be the what? The broker
vic.
in charge
charge.
of those 100 agents. And then that one sole proprietor compensates the agents that work for them. That's a sole proprietorship.
You
But
know,
if-
and go
But
ahead.
if that person who runs that 100 agent firm decides, you know what, this is silly for me to have all these commissions paid to me personally. I want to create a company and have these commissions paid to the company. Then they just became a what?
A firm.
A firm.
Company. A firm.
And Travis, if I'm jumping ahead, let me know. I just wanted to, compare and contrast these really fast. When you're a sole proprietor and you're representing, put yourself in the shoes of a broker in charge who is operating as a sole proprietor. You have now hired 3 people underneath you. If any one of these people F's up and they get sued, that lawsuit can come for all of your assets. It's you. It's your stuff.
It's you personally, because you personally are being compensated. And so now do you see why most brokers in charge would not want to operate as a sole proprietor? If you're supervising other people, does it make sense to have a company between you and the clients in case one of the people you supervise screws up? It would be the company being sued and not you personally.
Yes. Give me a limited liability company. Good God.
Because here's the thing. If we go back, if we take away Sarah's Realty LLC, because it'd be a lot easier for Sarah to just be paid directly. For the money just to come into Sarah directly. She doesn't have to create a company. She doesn't have to spend any money to create a company. She doesn't have to get a firm license. She doesn't have to do any of that. Is everybody with me so far?
Yeah.
She literally just says to the real estate commission, I'm the broker in charge of these 4 people.
Yes, and it's like the taxes and everything go to her social security number, that kind of deal.
So follow that through. Now, one of these other people screws up. Who did the clients hire?
Sarah.
So who are the clients going to sue?
Sarah.
Ultimately,
Sarah. And that is the risk of running that business in that structure. But if Sarah takes herself out of that loop, creates Sarah's Realty LLC, and the clients hire Sarah's Realty LLC, and then Sarah's Realty LLC compensates these people, including Sarah herself, by the way.
Yep.
If there is a problem and the client sues, are they suing Sarah or are they suing the company?
The company.
They're suing the company. And folks, I don't think you have to be a legal expert to understand that Sarah's going to be a lot more comfortable if it's Sarah's Realty LLC being sued than Sarah being sued.
Because that lawsuit will stop right there at her company. It ain't going to come affect her other stuff.
Travis,
Howard, did that connect? Sorry, Elizabeth.
Yes, it makes sense.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Okay, so my question is, my question is if you were going to operate on your own and not be affiliated with someone else's company, it would still be wise for you to create an LLC so that even if you screw up, just the LLC gets sued, not you for your private assets.
Well,
and
that's an even deeper level point. I'm glad you're there mentally. Could each one of these people, if they wanted to, if they decided to, could this gentleman right here decide to create his own LLC?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And so in other words, he still works for Sarah's Realty LLC, but when Sarah's Realty LLC pays him, they don't pay him anymore. They pay his what?
LLC.
His LLC. And then he pays himself through his LLC. By the way, is that another firm that we just created when he created that business entity there?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So could we have one firm working for another firm? Could we layer them in like that?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
To be precise, that's kind of what goes on. Like, you have your company who pays Leslie's company who pays Leslie.
That's it. That's exactly right. Leslie has an LLC of her own. I don't pay Leslie. I pay NatWin Real Estate LLC. And actually, I don't pay anybody. Trav Talks LLC pays NatWin Real Estate LLC.
And the reason for that is because you'd want to do that not only for liability, but because corporations pay a smaller income tax than individuals. So if you're making $800,000 a year selling real estate, you only need $100,000 to live on. You only want the salary of $100,000.
Less taxation and less liability. But it does require firm licensure.
Right.
When you add in that extra layer of now I have a company, now you not only need a personal broker's license, but there also needs to be a firm license for the company. How are we feeling about that? Everybody good with that? Okay.
Yeah, really.
Please let us know if you don't.
And by the way, there is no when we talk about getting a firm license, it's nothing like getting a person's real estate license. People who want real estate licenses have to take classes and take exams. Guess what a company who wants a real estate license has to do?
Just
Pay
pay.
Moolah.
Pay money. Pay money. As long as the company is owned by somebody who has a real estate license, it is automatic that the firm license gets issued. You just paying $100 to the real estate commission and saying, hey, I need a license for this thing. Oh, and by the way, paying $45 a year to renew that license too.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that just because I always thought it was more, but it's just $45.
It's still the same 45. Yep. Still the same 45 to renew. Okay.
Very cool. Good job,
So,
everybody.
when we talk about agency, we need to remember that the client is the boss, right? And so in every situation, we always, and this is just a challenge to remind yourself over and over and over, in every situation, we work for either one side or the other. And yes, in some rare instances, work for both sides, which adds obviously a whole other layer of complexity there, trying to serve two masters going in two opposite directions at the same time. But in the vast majority of cases, we are either on the buyer's team in a transaction, and we're focusing on sales transactions for right now, or we're on the seller's team in a transaction. Now, one of the hard things to understand is the vocabulary of this agency stuff.
Okay, this is when we need to get our margaritas.
Yes, you need a drink. I hate to hit you with this before 10 o'clock in the morning, but we got to get it out. We got to get it out of the way.
Oh my gosh, yes. All right, let's do it.
All right, so everybody needs to like 100% zone in, like kick your dog out of the room, kick your kids out of the room. You got it, because I'm telling you, this is tough right here to wrap your brain around, but I'm going to try to break it to you as
Best Buy
as I can.
later on.
I'm going to try to give it to you as easy as I can. When we see ing on the end of a word, we are talking about what somebody is doing in the transaction. And the two words that we're going to be focused on are listing and selling. Those are two different functions in a real estate transaction. When you're involved in a real estate transaction as a real estate licensee, you are either listing or you are selling. They are two opposite things. That's the first thing I want you to, and I want you to repeat that after me. Listing is the opposite of selling.
Listing is the opposite of selling.
When I'm listing, I'm not selling. And when I'm selling, I'm not listing.
When I'm listing,
When
I'm
I'm
not
listing,
selling.
I'm not selling. When I'm
And when I'm
selling,
selling,
I'm
I'm
not
not
listing.
listing.
They are like black and white, on and off, night and day, complete what?
Different.
Different.
Opposites.
They are opposites. And so in any given transaction, both things have to happen. You need somebody who's listing in the transaction, and you need somebody else who is selling in the transaction. Is everybody with me on that?
Yes.
They are two roles. They can be fulfilled by the same person. So here's the analogy I like to use. Cooking and eating are two different things, correct?
Correct.
If you go to a restaurant, don't you have two different people doing those things?
Yes.
One group of people cooking and a different group of people eating, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
But if you make dinner at home, are cooking and eating still two different functions?
Yes.
Yes.
But is the same person doing both functions?
Yes.
At home, yes.
If you're cooking at home, the same person is cooking and what?
Eating.
Eating. It's still two functions. Both have to be done, but they can be accomplished by the same person. Is everybody with me on that? So here's what I want you to understand. Even though listing and selling are two different functions, they can be accomplished by the same person. Is everybody with me so far?
Yes.
So here's a practical question. Could the listing agent and the selling agent be the same person in a transaction?
Yes.
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 Because the ing simply refers to a task that is being accomplished. All right. Are we all good so far?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about what task is being accomplished. The task of working with the seller, the task of putting the property on the market, the task of putting a sign in the ground, the task of putting the property in the MLS, the task of trying to find a buyer for that property is called, folks, listing.
Listing.
And the people who are doing those tasks are going to be referred to as listing agents.
Yep. It's what you are doing.
So if somebody is, now this has nothing to do, by the way, with who we represent in the transaction. We're not talking about representation right now. We're simply talking about task mastering, right? We're talking about doing things. That's where the ing part comes in. Is everybody with me on that? So if I am putting the property on the market, I am listing. If I am putting the sign in the ground, I am listing. If I am meeting with the seller talking about putting the property on the market, I am listing. Is everybody with me on that?
Yes.
Because the listing side of the transaction is what person's side between the buyer and the seller. What person is on the listing side of the transaction?
The seller.
Seller.
The seller. The listing side is the seller's side. All the actions and activities that happen that deal with the seller are listing activities. Does that make sense for everybody so far?
Yes.
That's the easy one.
Very.
Now, this is where you got to rely on what I told you earlier. Is selling the opposite of listing?
Yes.
Yes. Selling,
No.
it doesn't depend in this case. Selling is the opposite of what?
Listing.
Listing. Say it with me. Selling
Selling is the opposite of
listing.
of listing.
So again, I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about, if I'm putting the sign in the ground, what am I doing?
Listing.
I'm listing. If I'm talking to the seller about marketing their property, what am I doing?
Listing.
Listing. If I'm talking to a buyer about a property, what am I doing, folks?
Selling.
Selling it to them.
I am selling it to them. If I'm showing a buyer a property, what am I doing, folks?
Selling.
I am selling it to them. If I am helping a buyer write an offer, what am I doing, folks?
Selling.
I am selling it to them. So whose side of the transaction is the selling side of the transaction?
Buyer.
Buyer.
The buyer. And that's the one that drives people to drinking. You've got to make peace with that terminology because you're going to see it all over the place. And here's the thing. If we're talking about questions that always center on knowing whose team you're on, would it be absolutely a backbreaker for you not to know that the selling side is the buyer's side of the transaction. Would that kill you on test questions?
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes. And it does. It does. We see people missing this stuff by these questions. And it's like a couple that is getting them by. So please get this ingrained in your head.
It is such an important thing early on to make peace with this terminology. And so
You'll see it on your practice.
You will, but you just learn to make peace with it instantly, and you instantly associate when I say, okay, Seth has got a listing presentation this afternoon. Well, that means he's going to talk to who?
Seller.
To a seller, right? If he's doing a listing presentation, he's going to talk to a seller. If I said to you, Seth's got a showing this afternoon. What's he doing? Who's he meeting with?
The buyer.
The buyer.
Buyer. So he's what?
Selling.
Selling. He's trying to sell that property to them. Is that starting to click and make sense for everybody?
Yes,
Good. And the reason this is so important is because you're going to get a very long paragraph of a question, and you're going to need to know who is who. They're going to throw these out at you and expect you to, connect who these people are.
You've got to connect the dots. Now, I will tell you what finally clicked in my brain years ago for these. And I'm going to say it now and we'll see if it clicks for you. You list things for sellers, you sell things to buyers.
Mm-hmm.
You list things for sellers, you sell things to buyers, right? So if I'm talking to the buyer, I'm selling, baby. Sell it. As a matter of fact, when people go show my listings, if I have a listing and somebody else calls me and says, hey, I want to take a buyer over and show it your listing, what do I tell them when I hang up the phone? I'm like, well, go sell the damn thing, right? Because we don't want you just showing it. We want you what?
To sell it.
We want you to sell it.
Yeah.
And so I think that word sell is easy to associate with the wrong person. Selling is the act of dealing with a buyer. When you're talking to a buyer, you're selling to the buyer. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I know I feel like I beat the point to death, but it is such an important terminology, and it's so easy to. So again, just to distill it down as simple as it can possibly be, we'll say, oh, they're the listing firm in the transaction. Well, here's what that means. Whose side of the transaction is that firm working on? If they're the listing firm, whose side?
Seller side.
Seller side.
On the seller side. If I said to you, oh, well, they were the selling firm in a transaction, who did they bring to the transaction? Did they bring the seller or did they bring the buyer?
Buyer.
Buyer.
I brought the buyer.
That's all that is to it. That's literally all there is to it. So making peace with that terminology is huge. Okay. They're just actions. And that's why, and this is an important note. When we talk about listing or selling, they don't necessarily have anything to do with who we represent. Let me show you what I mean by that. A seller has hired me to represent them in the transaction. Now, they want me to put their house on the market. So am I the listing agent?
Yes.
Yes, right? But they've hired me to represent their best interest. Is everybody with me on that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I hold an open house. Now, the purpose of an open house is to meet with who when they come in?
Buyers.
Buyers.
Buyer comes to an open house, loves it, wants to make an offer. First of all, am I going to do my best to make sure that happens, to make sure that buyer submits an offer? If that means getting the paperwork out, showing them where to sign, where to fill things out, am I going to do all those things in the hope of representing the best interest of my seller? What do y'all think?
Yes, absolutely.
For sure.
Yes.
Folks, when I'm talking to the buyer, when I'm helping them figure out how to submit their offer, when I'm showing them the property, even though I'm the listing firm because I brought the listing to the market, I was hired by the seller. When I'm doing all those things, what function am I when I'm sitting there dealing with that buyer all day long?
Selling.
Selling agent. So when that one closes, folks, am I going to be both the listing agent and the selling agent on that transaction?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Now, here's what you need to understand. Do I represent both of those people?
No.
I love it.
Just because I'm functioning on both sides of the transaction does not mean I'm representing both sides of the transaction. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right?
Right. Just because those terms tell you what this person is doing does not tell you who they represent.
Because to know who we represent, we have to go back to who hired us. And in that case, only one of those people hired us, and that is who?
The listing
client.
agent.
Seller.
Which is the seller.
The seller.
So we have representation with the seller, even though we are functioning as both the listing agent and the selling agent. And so it's a separate deal. The ING talks about what we're doing. The representation is another question. That's an important distinction. Okay. And listen, we will revisit that hundreds of times as we work through this. So it's not like you get one shot to get it, but I'm trying to give you the best foundation possible for as we go through this. So look at our buddy Jim here. This is Jim, who's an on-site builder representative. He works for the builder who has signed an agreement with Jim's office. He is an agent of the builder / seller. Is everybody with me so far on what Jim's relationship is here?
So this is builder seller is his client?
The builder seller is his client that he has been hired by the builder seller. So would it be appropriate to say that he represents the seller? What do y'all think?
Yes.
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 He represents the seller.
Yes.
He works
Would it
for
also be appropriate to say he is the listing agent?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because he is also working with the seller who is the builder, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. So is Jim listing or selling in these pictures? In these pictures, Jim is demonstrating all the features of one of the builder seller's homes to buyers who are very interested in the property. Is Jim functioning as the listing agent here or the selling agent?
Selling.
Selling agent.
Selling.
Very good.
Selling agent. Now we know he's already the listing agent because we've established that. So at this point, Jim is functioning as what?
A
At
seller.
that point, the selling.
At this point, the selling, but overall in the transaction as both. Does it make sense to say that he is the listing agent and the selling agent in the transaction?
Yes, because we have already established who he represents. And then also whenever we see him in these pictures right here, he's saying, look at these soft close cabinets. Look at this granite, like, selling the property.
That's exactly what he's doing. He's selling it. That is precisely what he's doing. He's selling it to these buyers. And here's the way I always answer this question for myself. Go find me the agent who listed the property. Well, what's his name in this case?
Jim.
Jim. Now go find me the agent who's selling the property. What's his name in this case?
Jim.
So Jim is both the listing agent and the selling agent in this transaction. Does that make sense for everybody? Now, when he's talking to the seller, he's functioning as the listing agent. When he's talking to the buyer, he's functioning as the selling agent. And he's going to switch gears back and forth depending on which side he's dealing with. Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Not really, but yeah.
What's holding you up?
Here's the thing. That's just what he's doing. That has nothing to do with who he's working for. That has nothing to do with whose best interest he's looking out for. That's not going to switch. No matter who is standing in front of him, who is Jim working for in this?
The seller.
The
Seller, the builder.
Or the seller, which has nothing to do with who he's talking to. It has nothing to do with the fact that these are buyers standing in front of him. Here's how we know he's working for the seller. Signed an agreement with Jim's office. What did the seller do? They hired him.
Yeah.
And that's where his loyalty is going to lie. It doesn't matter when he's over here dealing with these buyers that he's selling them the property. Is he looking out for the buyer's best interest here?
No.
No.
He better not be.
Mm-mm.
He better not be, because he has a client and it ain't that buyer.
So why do buyers work with dual agents?
Well, let's hold off on the
Okay.
terminology of dual agents, because that's not dual agency. I want to be clear, this is not dual agency. Dual
Okay.
agency means both parties have hired Jim. And in this case, that hasn't happened. Only one side has hired Jim.
Okay, got it.
Let me tell you what these buyers are right here. There is an appropriate label for these buyers. It's a very technical term. Y'all ready for the appropriate label for these buyers?
Suckers.
That is the appropriate labeling for that buyer. In my opinion, any buyer who walks into a situation and deals with the agent that has been hired by who?
The seller.
The seller, and chooses not to have representation of their own, they deserve what they get, folks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's exactly what these buyers have done in this situation. Is that clicking for everybody?
Yeah.
Yes.
These are the people who represent themselves in the court case, while the other party has, like, the dream team over there of attorneys. Yeah, you can do that, but you're going to lose. And that's exactly what these people are going to do. They're going to lose, because Jim's going to be the night. Look at him smiling back there. Look at the smile on his face. You know why Jim's smiling? Because he just talked them into the level 7 granite countertops that are an extra $12,000.
He's like, y'all stupid.
He just got them to agree to the hand scrubbed floors that are an extra $27,000.
This is a big thing, though.
Because
he's
like looking out for the best interest of his client,
which is the builder, the seller. And this is huge, because a lot of times when people go into those new construction offices, those people are friendly and they make you think that they're on your team. So, it's very important to know, like, you can have representation in this situation. And in this case, they don't.
Malia, is that what you needed me to go back to? You said you wanted me to go back a slide. Is that good?
Yeah, thank you.
Is this the same thing like if someone were to go to an open house?
Absolutely. This is the same.
Okay.
I love that question. I missed who asked it, but I love that question. Is this the same thing if you go to an open house? Yes. If you go to an open house as a buyer, that agent that you're dealing with there, who have they been hired by? Who do
The
they
seller.
have their
Yeah,
loyalty?
they've been hired by the
Seller.
seller.
They represent the seller's best interest, not yours. Of course, are they going to be nice? Yes,
Of
they're going to have
course.
cookies for you.
Wine.
Because
Wine,
folks,
champagne,
think
come on
about-
in.
think about every time you've ever been sold something in your life. Isn't the person selling you something going to do everything they can to make you feel comfortable, to make you feel happy, to kiss your rear end, because they are getting paid a commission if you spend money?
Yes.
Got it. Got it.
When you
We
go
take you
to,
to dinner.
and so here's another one if you want to think of it. When you go to the car dealership, that salesperson that runs out there, are they nice to you as a buyer?
Yes.
Of course they are. But are they looking out for your best interest?
Nope.
No.
Not at all.
No, they are looking out for the best interest of their client, the dealership.
Mhm.
Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And that's what, remember, agency aside, it's still a sales business. And these are the sales terms. This listing and selling, these are the terms just for the raw brass knuckles, get it sold. They don't necessarily relate to the representation, but we got to get those terms in there because they're going to get used so often. How are we feeling so far? Is everybody we're getting making a little progress here?
Yes.
Feet wet.
All right. So why don't we do this? I got about 10:15. Let's take a quick break because you need.
I do think that's a good idea.
You need mental gaps here, I think, here with agency especially. So let's take a quick.
All right.
So when we broke for a few minutes there, We kind of just introduced this idea of, what is agency as a general sort of idea, but then also what are these labels that we use in the transaction, like listing and selling. And now we really want to start to get into the representation side of things. And that's what agency really is. Agency.
So right now, what we're doing is bridging that gap between those terms that we have talked about, what is establishing that somebody is doing. Now we're getting into, this is a totally flipping the script now. It's
right. Now we're talking about who we represent, because that's what agency is. Agency is representation. And often in our business, it's easier when the person that we're doing something for is also the person that we represent. That's the easiest thing. For example, if I'm showing a buyer a property, I would much rather be showing the buyer the property as a buyer's agent than showing the buyer the property as the seller's agent, because it's more comfortable. It's easier, but it's not always true. So we have to talk about this process of agency. And agency is created when we are hired. I cannot stress that enough. On the test, you need to continuously be looking for, okay, do they have an agreement? Do they have an arrangement? Have they signed an agreement? Because ultimately, until a buyer or seller has hired us in a transaction, we are not their agent. We don't.
right.
We cannot just insert ourselves in these transactions. Don't think that just because I show up and show a buyer a house that I am that buyer's agent. It doesn't work that way. That's not how agency works.
Keep in mind, when I said earlier, there's going to be some stuff in here that we're going to hound on, and it constantly trips people up on our exam that we've seen. What he just said is something that we say over and over and over, and people get it wrong.
Well, let me point something out here. And I think that you're not going to like it, but you need to hear it. I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation. I'll give you all a hypothetical situation, and then I want to ask you a question about it.
Okay.
Let's say that Seth gets somebody reaches out to him from Facebook, and they know he's involved in real estate. They know he helps teach real estate classes. They see his posts, yada, yada, yada. So they reach out to him and they say, hey, Seth, we've been thinking about buying a house, and there's this house that just came on the market down the street from us. And we were wondering if there's any way you would show it to us this afternoon. Y'all following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Now, this is not Seth's listing. It's not our office's listing. This is just some random property that's on the market by another real estate office. And this buyer has randomly called and said, would you show it to us? Do you all think that happens all the time in real estate? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yes. Now, do you think Seth can, if he chooses to, go over there and show that property to that buyer, so long as the listing firm is okay, which I'm sure they will be because they want somebody to sell it anyway. But do you think Seth is going to go show that property to that buyer if that's what he feels like doing? What do y'all think?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yes. Are you ready for the crushing, heartbreaking, but true realization that none of you have come to yet? Are you ready?
Ready.
He's working for free
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Nobody hired him.
because nobody hired him yet. And folks, it takes some people in this business half their career to figure out that until somebody hires you, your butt is working for free. Because here's what they do. They run around and whine and complain about it. They say, this buyer, I can't believe it. I've been showing them houses for 6 weeks. And then they went and bought a house with somebody else. I'm like, and why are you whining? Why are you complaining?
Mhm.
Well, that ain't fair. Why is it not fair? When did they hire you?
It was your fault.
It's your fault.
So was Seth supposed to tell her before he go show her the listing to to sign with him?
I'm not going to say what Seth's supposed to do. That's his business and the way he operates his business. But what I'm telling, and I get where you're coming from, Tasha, with the question. It's a great question. Here's what I'm telling you, though. There's only two ways that Seth can go show that property. Having no client at all at that point, because he wasn't hired by the seller. Everybody agree with that?
Right.
And he hasn't been hired by the buyer. And folks, at that point, he's working for free. Or he can have a conversation with that buyer and have them talk about potentially hiring him, in which case he would be working for the buyer. Those are the only two options. Now, that does not mean it is necessarily a bad thing for him to go show that property to that buyer while working for free.
All right.
Folks, here's the news flash. Do you think it's going to be necessary to do that to build a relationship and get to a point where a lot of buyers are going to be willing to hire you?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is such a necessary part of what to do, right?
On the flip side of that, just to kind of hound on what you just said, if I go and show those people that house, and this shit happened to me, seriously.
It will.
I showed people a house and they went and signed with another agent and had them facilitate the transaction for them because I couldn't write something until like the next 30 minutes or so.
Right.
So I can't get mad. I didn't have an agreement.
That's exactly right. And so it's so important to understand, not just for real world purposes, but for test taking purposes. Until we've actually been hired, we're not working for these people. Does that make sense for everybody?
And so as we go on in this chapter, it's going to make a little bit more sense how to pick up, what to look for that's going to tell you you've been hired or this person's been hired. There's multiple ways that you can be told that.
Yes. And you got to start to look for them, right? Now,
Yes.
the word principal means the same thing as client. This is the person who has hired us. A principal is the same thing as client. In a transaction, this is our boss. They are the person. Now, notice down here, and you will see I have done this on pretty much, I've tried to be consistent with this on slides where I have said they have hired the agent / broker / firm, because it could be any one of those situations. In North Carolina, remember, brokers can work without supervision. So in that case, the client would hire the broker. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
If you work for a firm, though, who would the client hire?
Firm.
So for as an example, Seth has chosen to work for a firm.
What chapter has that visual, Travis, of Trav Talks?
It's coming up. There's
oh, good. Sweet. Never mind. I'm sorry.
It's coming up again several times. But when you hire, quote unquote, Seth, you can't hire him directly. You have to go through Trav Talks. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And
it should.
So that's why I've tried to, on all these slides, put agent, broker, firm, because when we say we've been hired, that just means we've been hired in whatever way we chose to structure our business. If I'm a broker who's working without supervision, that means I've been hired directly by the client. If I'm a broker who's decided to be affiliated with a firm, that means my firm has been hired by this client. But does it make any difference? If my firm's been hired by the client and I work for the firm, don't I work for the client as well?
Yes.
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 Absolutely. Okay. So when you see this word,
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure, go ahead.
If I'm a provisional broker, okay, and I'm working for a BIC, are they technically hiring me or are they hiring the BIC?
They are hiring let me think. I can give you a specific answer for North Carolina, but it might confuse you on the national section of the test. So I'm going to give you the answer that sort of splits the baby and will not confuse you for North Carolina and hopefully help you on the test. They're hiring the broker in charge. If you have a broker in charge, they're hiring the broker in charge and everybody that broker in charge supervises. Is probably the best way to answer it in a pre-license class. theoretically in North Carolina, they're hiring the firm, and then everybody in the firm, including the broker in charge, works for that client. Okay. But if you want to think of it as, I'm hiring the BIC, and then, the everybody that works for the BIC, the truth is we don't really work for BICs in North Carolina. That's where the disconnect is there. I was looking for that slide that Seth mentioned. We don't work for BICs in North Carolina. Even the BIC works for the firm. And so that's why it's a little bit of a different distinction there, but it's close enough. It's close enough. So some other terms that we will see: customer. And gosh, what an important terminology here. Just look at this statement by itself, because this is where a definition that's so short says so much. A customer, folks, is the exact opposite of a client. As a matter of fact, a customer is anybody who's not our client. In a transaction, to get a transaction across, just to give you an example, just today, my listing at Lake Gaston, I have communicated with the buyer's agent. Is the buyer's agent my client?
No.
No.
No. So then what are they?
Customers.
I've communicated with the septic inspector. Is the septic inspector my client?
No.
No. So what are they?
Customers.
They're a customer of mine. I've communicated today with the home inspector. Is the home inspector my client?
No.
No. So then what are they?
Customers.
A customer. So am I going to have a bunch of customers in every transaction I deal with?
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm only going to have one what?
Client.
One client. And so customers is everybody that we deal with so that our client doesn't have to deal with them. That's the way I like to think of a customer. These are all the people that my client would have to deal with if I hadn't been hired, right? Because think about it this way. The septic inspector needed to know where the septic tank was. If the seller had not hired me, who would have had to have that conversation this morning?
The client.
The seller would have, right? My client, the seller, would have had to have that conversation with the septic inspector. The home inspector needed to get in. If I had not been hired, who would have had to have that conversation with the home inspector?
The seller.
The seller client, my seller client would, right? The buyer's agent. If I wasn't involved in the transaction, who would that buyer's agent have to be talking directly to?
The seller.
The seller client.
So the way I think of a customer is these are all the fools that we have to deal with so our client doesn't have to deal with it.
That's really what you get paid for.
This is what we get paid for, is dealing with all the garbage, right? So that here's the thing, in a perfect transaction, how many people is my seller client going to communicate with for the entirety of the transaction?
One.
One. Me. That's it. Because I'm going to run interference and deal with everybody else on their behalf. Does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it means when I say I have one client, but I have a whole stable full of customers in this transaction. And here's the interesting thing. None of those customers are more or less important to me than the others, because none of them are important to me at all, other than helping them accomplish whatever they need to accomplish to keep the transaction moving toward a smooth conclusion for my client, right? Do I really care that the home inspector has a great day when he goes out and inspects the property? No, I don't care.
Just being
But
careful.
it's my job to make sure that that person can get their job done so that the transaction can continue to move smoothly for my client. Is everybody
Then
following
your job
that?
got done.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I love your Best Buy example, which you might be getting to.
And that's why I've given you a picture here of somebody like a clerk in a store. Think of somebody who works at Best Buy. They deal with who all day? What do we call those people that go in the store and shop all day long?
Customers.
But are they working for any of those customers?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, they work for Best Buy.
Best
That's their client. And here's the thing. Why are they there? They're there so that Best Buy doesn't have to deal with the customers. They're there to deal with the customers in the place of Best. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
That's what we do. So we are sort of we're the filter between customers and between our client.
And so just to kind of like help relate that really fast on that Best Buy example, when, if I'm standing at the counter and I'm checking people out, and if somebody comes up and asks me about a TV, of course I'm going to work with them. Of course I'm going to sell them on the TV. I represent the client, which is Best Buy. So in that instant, I would be the listing agent. But at the same time, in that same scenario, if somebody asked me about features of a TV or something like that, I would also be functioning as the selling agent.
So
but I work for Best Buy.
I think you've hit right at the heart of a big information gap that people have.
Yes.
The word help. Do you all think it's appropriate to help a customer? Now, just think about Best Buy. Is it the job of the person working in Best Buy to help the customer? What do y'all think?
Yeah.
Yes, of course, because a happy customer is going to eventually result in a good transaction for Best Buy. Does that make sense for everybody?
Refer people to.
So here's now apply that to real estate. A listing firm that's been hired by a seller to represent the best interest of the seller. Is it appropriate for them to help a buyer make an offer on that property?
Yes.
Yes, because they are a customer, and we always do what with customers?
Help them. Deal with.
Help them. But see, here's the problem you're going to have, and this is why I have to point this out to you, because I know where your blind spots are. Is help the same as advice?
No.
No. Would it be appropriate to advise that buyer on what to offer if we represent the seller? No. But it would be appropriate if the buyer says, I want to make an offer. Here's what I'm going to say. Let me help you with that. Because that's exactly what my client would want me to do, right? Here's the way I always answer the question. If it was my client standing there rather than me, what would they do? If a buyer said to the seller, I want to make an offer, do you think the seller would say, no, I can't help you with that? Or be like, let me get the damn paper. Let's roll. What would they say?
Let me get the paper. Let me get the paper. Let's roll.
Let me get the paper. Let's roll. They would be glad to help that buyer make an offer, correct?
Yeah.
Correct.
Would the seller give the buyer advice about what they should offer, though? No, because that would work against the best interest of the seller themselves, right? So agency becomes pretty simple to see what I should do in any given situation, because all I got to do is pretend I'm my client. Pretend that you are them. What would they do that's in their own best interest? And that's most likely what you should be doing at that point in time. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to place some legal limits on that. There are things that our clients might do that we're not allowed to do, but we'll talk about those later. But as an overall idea, that's how agency really works. Now, this is admittedly probably my favorite word in the class. It's not the most important word in the class. I don't know why I like the word so much, but fiduciary is my favorite word in the entire class. Fiduciary is a trust-based relationship with a client. The word fiduciary literally means that the client has decided that we are a better representative of their best interest than they are themselves. I mean, ultimately, that's why they hire us. They hire us because they believe that with our advice, with our expertise, with our guidance, they will get a better outcome than if they worked and move forward in the transaction without us on their side. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
And that's what fiduciary means. Now, you could do the Eastern North Carolina pronunciation, which, in Eastern North Carolina, for those of you who are not from Eastern North Carolina, we always emphasize the first syllable of every word. So if you're from Eastern North Carolina, this is fiduciary. That's a fiduciary relationship. But for the rest of us, it's a fiduciary relationship. But It just means we have been trusted by our client to always do what's in the best interest of the client. That is not the way real estate works in every state. Now, remember, you're taking a national exam. This next terminology does not apply to North Carolina at all. We are a fiduciary brokerage state. We are supposed to look out for the best interest of our client, the one that has hired us in the transaction. Some states, Florida being a prime example, operate as what we call transactional brokerage. Now, I will tell you, this is relatively rare. There are only a couple places it happens. Most states handle real estate transactions in the same manner we do with fiduciary brokerage.
Fiduciary.
But in Florida, as an example, they practice transactional brokerage. When you think about transactional brokerage, think about your stockbroker. Is your stockbroker looking out for your best interest when you say you want to buy or sell stock?
No.
Yes.
They are?
No, they are not.
Oh,
No, he
I'm
don't care.
sorry.
Best
That's
I
what we
remember,
pay for.
best
They just
I remember,
execute the trade.
they make money when you buy or sell, whether you make money or lose money, right? They get
Right.
money on the trade, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Are they representing the best interest of the company that you're buying or selling stock from? What do y'all
Be
think?
quiet on this.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not,
No.
I don't think so. They're just there for the trade. They're not looking out for the company. If I call my stockbroker and I say, I want to buy shares in Microsoft, my stockbroker's not looking out for Microsoft's best interest. They're not looking out for my best interest. What are they going to simply do?
Sell, buy it for you.
So they can get paid.
Right? And they're going to get paid. That is transactional brokerage, folks. Transactional brokerage is real estate brokerage that does not involve any representation of anybody's best interest. It is deal making. Let's make a deal. That's all it is.
Why would you do that? Who would want that?
Well, I think it's a cynical approach to real estate. If I had to honestly answer that question,
truly,
here's what's happened, in my opinion, in places like Florida. Fiduciary brokerage is wonderful if it's done correctly. But let me ask y'all an honest question. Do you think there are real estate brokers in North Carolina who don't always do what's in the best interest of their clients, but start to do what's in their own best interest?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, guess what you're practicing when you're doing what's in your own best interest and not in the best interest of your client?
Transactional brokerage.
Practicing transactional brokerage. And so basically the state of Florida just admitted that everybody in the state of Florida who has a real estate license is a crook and can't be trusted. So we're not even going to pretend to represent people. We're just going to say we're here to make the deal. It's a very cynical approach to real estate, in my opinion. I dislike it, but that's what is that clicking for everybody? If you went and you said, here's the real estate agent in the transaction, you're like, oh, well, whose team are they on? And you're like, nobody. They're just here to get the thing sold. That's transactional brokerage. In North Carolina, the real estate brokers are on a team. They are supposed to be loyal to their team.
So
I have a very good friend in Florida. He's a real estate agent, and I call him the mercenary broker.
You call him the mercenary.
And something just to kind of hound in on one more time, just because I don't know if it got through clearly enough. Transactional brokerage is not practiced in North Carolina.
That is correct.
This is something you'll see on the national portion, but the next couple ones we're getting ready to go over will be practiced, but the only one. So if you get a question that says like, what kind of agency is not practiced in North Carolina, this would be it.
That's exactly right. We don't do transactional brokerage. This is not legal in North Carolina. In North Carolina, for a real estate agent, broker, firm to be involved in a transaction, they must pick a side, folks. There is no, we're just in the middle, not taking anybody's side here. You got to pick a side in this state. And that's what fiduciary.
That's both sides.
Or you can pick both sides, but that still means being on a side, right? Transactional is literally, I'm not on anybody's side. So
you're a paper pusher.
So you think about a transactional broker. A transactional broker is going to do what's in their own best interest. You know, so whatever gets them, but that means when, you know, when they're negotiating a deal, they're going to be sitting there looking, doing the numbers for themselves. Like, how much commission do I make? And when does it close? And they don't care at all. If you're a real estate agent in Florida, do you care that the buyer needs to close at the end of the month?
Nope.
No, not your job. Do you care that the seller
Tough
needs
luck.
to sell this house first before they buy the new house?
No.
No.
No,
And I don't
not
care if
your
it puts you in a
job.
bind.
Not
They
your
just
job.
care
I
about
don't care.
commission.
I don't care how much of a bind it puts you in. Let's make a deal, baby. That's
Mhm.
transactional brokerage. In
And they don't give advice.
In North Carolina, it's literally our job to care. We are supposed to take on all of those stresses from our client and protect them from them. And so where do you think we have a lot more liability? Fiduciary brokerage or transactional brokerage?
Fiduciary.
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 Sure, right? Transactional brokerage, you basically just look at everybody and say, not my job to protect you. Figure it out.
Right.
Right?
Sucks to suck.
Excuse me. So if we were in a transaction, well, if we were in Florida and we decide to do that, it'd be on the home, well, whoever's buying to do the research on like easements and covenants and restrictions. Like we wouldn't expect
That's exactly right. So if you were in a transactional brokerage state, all those things that we think of traditionally as, well, this is why I hired an agent, because I needed this advice. I needed this expertise. You don't have to worry about that if you're in a transactional brokerage state, because you're not there for your expertise.
Got it. Thank you.
Here's the thing though. Yeah, on one hand, that makes the job a lot easier, but does that also sort of devalue us as professionals?
Yeah.
In my opinion.
I think it's a bad route on us.
Yeah.
I think to me, it's the road to there no longer being such thing as real estate agents, because if all we're there for is literally to open the door and put a key in, people are going to figure out how not to use us after a while.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's my opinion.
We can just set us up a little algorithm and do some electronic lock boxes. And
that's it. So this term agent, we will see that a lot. And most often we use it to reference a person. But in the legal terminology, the agent is who or whatever the client has hired, who or whatever the client has an agreement with. So if the client hires a broker directly, the broker is their agent. But if the client hires a firm, then the firm is their agent. Does that make sense for everybody? Right. So just think about the agreement. There's going to be a contract between this seller and either a real estate broker or a real estate firm. Whoever that client has hired with that agreement, that's the agent. Then this one down here at the bottom is the one that people go nuts over, and it's just, don't freak yourself out, a sub-agent. Folks, a sub-agent is just a subcontractor. That's all they are. So I'll give you an example. My listing that I've been dealing with this morning at Lake Gaston. The seller hired Trav Talks LLC. So who is the agent of the seller?
You.
Trav Talks LLC.
Not Travis. Because the agent is whoever or whatever the client hired. The client did not hire Travis. The client hired
Travis
what?
Travis
Talks Real Estate.
Trav Talks LLC.
Then Travis.
So
Travis.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Then Travis, it will be the sub-agent.
And there you go, Marcia. So what is Travis's relationship to that seller? Travis is just a subcontractor, right? And so Travis is a sub-agent of the seller. By the way, if the client hired Trav Talks LLC, doesn't that also include Seth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So would it be fair then to say that Seth is also a sub-agent of that seller?
Yes.
And anybody else?
Doesn't that also include Leslie?
Yeah.
Everybody works for Travis Talks.
Everybody who has their license affiliated with Trav Talks LLC is a
It's one firm.
sub-agent of that seller.
Okay, so if I get a listing for Remax, Remax Preferred is the firm, but I'm a sub-agent, even though I'm the agent that got the listing.
That is correct. Remax Preferred is the agent because that is who the client hired.
Okay.
You will not see on that agreement your name personally. You will see the seller's name and you will see the firm's name because that's who they hired. They hired Remax Preferred. Whoever, and this is the tough thing that people, it's not tough for people to understand. They just don't like it. So they refuse to understand it. If the client hires Remax Preferred, is it then up to Remax Preferred to assign whoever they would like to be the subcontractor that handles that transaction?
Yes.
Yes. There's no guarantee that William will be the one handling that transaction because the client didn't hire William. Who'd they hire?
Remax Preferred.
Remax Preferred. Even my listing at Lake Gaston, is there any guarantee that Coach Fox was going to have Travis Everette as his broker on that transaction?
No.
No, because he didn't hire Travis Everette. Who did he hire?
Trav Talks.
Trav Talks LLC. And then it becomes up to Trav Talks LLC to assign somebody to handle that transaction. And that somebody they assigned is a subcontractor that we refer to as a what?
Sub-agent.
As an agent.
A sub-agent.
I'm sorry, I had a difficulty while that keeps coming back up.
What's that?
I was trying to draw that out. So, here's the seller up here, Coach Fox in yellow. To get to Travis, he first had to hire his firm, who then went and hired Travis.
That's exactly right. But could Trav Talks LLC just as easily have assigned that listing to Seth or to Leslie or to Dolores?
Yeah, but what keeps them from doing that? Your contract?
There is nothing that keeps them from doing that. And that is the ugly truth that nobody likes about our business. There is nothing that keeps them from doing that. Because that client was hired by that client hired the firm.
Trav Talks LLC, go ahead.
The good side of that, I guess, is that if you go on vacation, anyone else in the firm can help your client while you're gone.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Because ultimately, Trav Talks LLC never goes on vacation. That's the beauty of hiring Trav Talks LLC. Travis might go on vacation, but Trav Talks LLC is simply going, it's just like being the manager of the restaurant, right? If you've got one person who can't cook that day, what do? You bring somebody else in to cook that day.
And but the restaurant never closed.
Because the restaurant can't close down, right? And so if Travis needs to go out of town, can Trav Talks LLC, through the person that has been designed to be in charge, what do we call that person?
Broker in charge.
A broker in charge. Could the broker in charge say, Seth, you need to handle this listing while Travis is on vacation?
Yes. That's a really, really big key thing to this. When you're looking at this, hopefully flow chart that makes sense, when you get a question, you got to keep going up the chain. You got to see who, so even though they're working with Travis, who ultimately represents that client. And the way that we could say this, and it will make a little bit more sense when we get into contracts, is this contract between Travis, the client, the Lake Gaston seller, is actually between Trav Talks LLC. Travis's name is not on that anywhere.
Nowhere on it.
Just Trav Talks LLC. And ultimately, everybody in there down in green represents his client. But in order for that client to work with Travis, they had to go through who he affiliates his license with, which is his firm,
now,
Trav Talks LLC.
From a completely practical standpoint, folks, let me assure you, it makes very little sense for any firm to upset the apple cart. If Seth brings a listing to our firm, 9,999 times out of 10,000, who are we going to assign to handle that listing? If Seth brings the listing, if Seth is the one that marketed, found the seller, they talked to Seth, they liked Seth, they said, yes, we'll hire you. And even though on the agreement it says Trav Talks LLC, it would be foolish for us to assign that listing to somebody else. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
And so the vast majority of the time, we're going to simply assign the sub-agent or that brought the business to the office in the first place. But that does not mean it has to be that way. So here is the test question. Is a broker in charge free to assign any client of the firm to any sub-agent within the firm at any time?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Because the client hired the firm.
Oh my gosh. And you know what? This is something that you guys should really keep in mind for when we do come across agency agreements. I don't know if it's covered in this chapter, but there's ways that we can terminate them. And this is I'm going to screenshot it because it's kind of a good visual to, play things out hypothetically.
Well, and that's so getting your brain in the right mode is so much of understanding agency. And that's why we go through these terms so slowly and so painstakingly, because it's all about a building process. Remember this difference between clients and customers. You will get test question after test question about who we owe duties to. What do we owe to somebody? What are we supposed to do for that person? And the first question you always need to ask yourself is, well, do I work for that person or not? Are they my boss or not? And by the way, when I'm saying boss, I don't mean your broker in charge. When I say boss, who are we talking about here?
The client. We're talking about our client who hired us.
Who is the client? Because the client is ultimately the boss of everybody within that office. Okay.
Amen.
And in that transaction. And so we owe our clients far more than we will ever owe customers. Okay.
I really want to relate that to something really fast. So the client is ultimately the boss of everybody in the office, everybody of Trav Talks LLC. Let's go ahead and connect something from one of our previous vocabulary words. An agent is whoever the client hires. If the client never hired somebody, there is no agent.
Correct.
So to become an agent, you have to be hired.
That's it. You're not an agent until you're hired. There has to be an agency relationship. And the only way to create that is they hire you with a document, with a contract.
So at default, you're a broker.
They aren't hiring me, they're hiring my firm.
That's it. If you have a firm. Because remember, in North Carolina, it's possible for what kind of agents, what kind of brokers in North Carolina are allowed theoretically to operate without any supervision.
Non-provisional.
Sole proprietor.
Non-provisional sole proprietor. Right? And if you're a non-provisional who doesn't have a broker in charge, who operates as a sole proprietor, you could be hired directly by a client. But that's a rare occurrence. Most of us are affiliated with a broker in charge. Most of us, even me, people say, well, you don't have a broker in charge. Yes, I do.
You are.
It just happens to be me. If
So
you
does it say that? I'm sorry, Travis. Does it say that on the paperwork? They've hired Trav Talks, but is there a fine print that says, I want Travis?
No.
Okay.
In fact, that's illegal to be on there because they're not allowed to pick and choose who they want to hire within the firm.
Okay. Once they hire the firm, it's everybody because you go on vacation and there's contracts to be signed. There's something to do. Seth and or Leslie are responsible for taking care of that.
That's
What if the sale goes through? How does that affect commissions? Or
well, see, and that's where Summer, I knew you were going there, and I love that you went there. But here's what you need to understand: the real estate commission doesn't care about you personally getting paid.
Okay.
The real estate commission cares that the client has been taken care of.
Okay.
If the transaction closes, who did the client hire?
The Trav Talks.
Travis Cox.
Trav Talks LLC. So who's going to get paid?
Travis
Travis
Cox.
Talks.
Trav Talks. How that money gets distributed is completely outside of the concern of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission.
Okay.
That is completely an internal. So that's where we talk about it is really important for the individual licensees to have an agreement with their firm, to have a contract with their firm, so that they do have some guarantee of payment of compensation and how that would be handled. Because otherwise, is it theoretically possible? I would love to think I would never do this. I haven't done it in 20 years in this business. I don't know why I ever would. Is it theoretically possible that Seth could have a transaction that he's worked the entire transaction, nobody else has done anything on it, and it closes, and I just say to him, you know what? I'm not paying you on this. As the broker in charge, I've just decided I'm not going to pay you. From the Real Estate Commission's perspective, is that 100% acceptable?
Yes.
Yes, because they don't give a crap.
Because
It's
they
not
don't
their
care.
job.
It's not their job to make sure Seth gets paid. That becomes an individual dispute between Seth and the office that he has affiliated himself with, and has nothing to do with real estate law.
Okay.
The North Carolina Real Estate Commission's job is to protect the public and those that they license to give them information. So they're out there more concerned about the public's interest. Now, if Travis was to ever do something like that, of course, you're wondering, like, what could he do? Take him to court. That's what court is for. But the Real Estate Commission is not a judge. They're not a court. They're not there to decide you should have been paid.
That's exactly right. So now let's follow that to its next logical conclusion. Let's say that Leslie takes a new listing. Now, the seller's not hiring Leslie, they're hiring Trav Talks LLC, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
She takes a listen. Let's say it's her best friend who lives next door to her. And I saw the Tyler question. I'll come back to it in just a second.
Heard that.
Her best friend lives next door to her. Listed the house, puts it on the market, gets a full price offer, goes under contract. Everybody with me so far?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, obviously, Leslie's expecting to get paid on this transaction, correct?
Correct.
Leslie decides to leave Trav Talks LLC, which she can do. She's an independent contractor. She can leave at any time she wants to. Who did the seller hire?
Trav Talk.
Trav Talks LLC.
Trav Talks LLC. Who does the seller remain a client of?
Travis
Trav
Talks.
Talks LLC, folks. You don't have clients and will travel. The clients stay with the firm.
Right.
Because the clients hired the firm. So
Actually
you better
happened to me as well.
That's why the decision of what firm to join is an important one, because is it going to become painful to leave a firm down the road if you have 3 or 4 things under contract? Yes, because the client and therefore the money belongs to them. And unless you've come to some arrangement, they don't have to pay you. They certainly don't have to let you take those clients with you, and they probably won't.
Now, Travis, is one quick thing I wanted to mention on that is that the thing here is this is how agency law goes. Of course, a real estate firm can have some written standard that says if you were to move firms, you can take your active clients with you. But as far as the default agency law goes, it's a client of the firm, therefore it stays with the firm.
That's exactly what my written agreement says. It says that if Seth leaves, he can take his clients with him. I don't want it. I have no desire to do that, but I don't have to. That's just what we've decided to do internally. And Russell asked, how about firms that work for firms? Don't overcomplicate it. It's the same thing. Ultimately, if Leslie's firm is working for my firm, it doesn't matter. The seller hired my firm.
Right.
Right?
Travis.
The seller hired my firm.
So we're saying that the client is the boss. You leave, correct, or someone leaves, Trav Talks or Real Max, whatever, the agent leaves. Can the client sever ties with Remax?
So here's what you're asking me, Taj, and I'm gonna let you answer your own question. Can anybody breach a contract if they decide that they're willing to suffer the penalty?
Sure.
What do you think the penalty of that client deciding, no, I'm leaving, you're terminated, I'm firing you as a firm? What do you think the penalty of such a termination would be?
Money. Sue for commission.
Remax gets paid no matter what.
Pay us the commission. You can leave. Bye. We don't want you anyway, but you're gonna pay us. Your choice.
Very true. And it's crazy to think about it that way because you're always thinking about the best interests of the client. But these things are two-sided here. When you go into a contract with a firm, it's a two-sided agreement.
It's a contract.
Yep.
It's a contract.
So Travis, I'm guessing that this ties into when we talked about the renewal. If you don't pay, somebody else can go in on your behalf for closing, but you won't be able to be there. And if the firm wants to pay you, they will.
That's right. It's up to the firm as long as you don't illegally attend the closing, which would be stay involved, right, with the closing. You can't, once your license falls inactive or expired, whatever it is, you can't continue to be engaged with the transaction. You have to stop. And so somebody else from your firm has to pick it up and run with it, which is the good side of this setup of things, because things don't just fall dead, right? Somebody else is there to pick up your slack.
But I got that question wrong on the quiz, because it said that the person whose license expired went to the closing to drop off a closing gift.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is that considered, huh?
No contact. Once their license goes inactive or expired, no contact at all with that buyer or seller until their license.
Regarding real estate or anything, stopping by to drop off a closing gift would be considered real estate activity.
They would not, that's too much.
Okay.
You literally can't talk to them.
I thought that was designated as the right answer when I took the quiz, because I didn't choose that. So
You're probably talking about the question that said except, because all of the other ones were correct, and that's the one that I got wrong for not reading it correct.
Yes.
Same here.
Those
Yep.
will
So
get
except
you.
the whole question. Yep.
I think it's an accept question. Tyler made a comment, and I know I got to go back to.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Tyler's question and comment was, so clients can't choose what agent they want to represent them in a transaction. And the answer is no, from a legal contractual standpoint. But again, you have to recognize that there's a practical side to the business. No office wants the reputation of, for lack of a better term, like, being iron fisted with clients like that. No, if as an example, Amy is the agent who has the relationship with this seller and who brought the seller to the transaction and who convinced the seller to list with the office, there is no incentive for the office to assign that transaction to anybody other than who, folks? Amy. Because that's who the seller already has a relationship with. So while the seller cannot technically choose Amy, by default, they really have. Because if Amy walks in the door to the office and says, I got a new listing, there's never going to be a question about who's going to handle that listing. We're going to let Amy handle it. There's no reason to do otherwise.
So here's a question for you, Travis. Let's say Sally's on floor duty, okay? And I've been working with a buyer for a long time and showing them a lot of property, right? They call Sally, they call the office to talk about something they saw online. They get Sally. Sally takes them out and shows them the property and writes up the offer. And I just get cut out of the deal. What happens then?
Well, that's between you and your firm, because it doesn't matter if you're both in the same office. The client had the same agent the whole time. Who was the client's agent?
The firm.
Was the firm.
Caldwell firm.
I gotcha. Okay.
From the real estate commission's perspective, the real estate commission would say, well, what's confusing about that? The money's going to get paid to Remax Preferred no matter what, and then they can figure out who the heck they want to pay.
So it depends on what the firm wants to do.
It depends on what the firm wants to do. The real estate commission is not going to be involved in this any further than the client paying whoever the client hires, whether that's a broker directly or a firm, most likely a firm. And at that point in time, the real estate commission is out of the picture, folks. They don't care.
Travis,
Are they even going to get concerned that the client hasn't paid the firm?
No, that's not as far as like making the client pay the firm. What they just want to see is does the firm have a contract with the client that entitles them to be paid? That's all they care about. Is the payment legal to the firm? That's it.
And that's the listing agreement.
Well, listing agreement, if you are hired by who?
The seller.
The seller.
And it's the contract if you're hired by the buyer, because
buyer
that's
agent. We call it a buyer agency agreement. A buyer agency agreement would be the contract that you would be hired with by a buyer. So,
yeah, just go ahead and associate that the Real Estate Commission is not here to make our job easier. All they're there to do is make sure that we had a relationship, an agency relationship with this person in order to get paid. If that goes unhappen, if you don't have an agency relationship and then you get paid, it is a violation.
they have a
You
problem
could lose
with
your
that.
license.
That's exactly right. So if they found out you got paid in a transaction and you didn't have a written agreement with somebody, that's a problem. That's what the Real Estate Commission. But let me put it this way. The Real Estate Commission's not concerned with you not getting paid. They're concerned with you getting paid when you should not have. That's that they're looking at it from the opposite perspective. They're not there to make sure you get paid. They're there to make sure you don't get paid when you should not. Does that make sense for everybody?
The only thing that comes to mind, which it may be irrelevant right here, but you remember that one closing I had out in Durham, and the attorney made the check out to me. The agent was Trav Talks LLC. I had to turn right back around.
He called me and he had left the closing. He said, I just looked at the check and the check's made out to me. I said, that's a problem.
I was very tempted to just deposit it.
I said, that's a problem. He said, well, can I? No, he asked me the legitimate question. He said, can I just deposit it? Which would most firms would be an obvious no, because in most firms, obviously, hopefully you all have figured this out by now. In most firms, do you think most firms are going to take a piece of that check when it comes in before they pay the agent? Right?
Of course.
Now, this is why Seth asked the question, because it is a legitimate question from his perspective, because he's on 100% commission split. I don't take anything out of his closings at all. And so he just said to me, he said, well, can I just deposit it since you're going to pay me 100% anyway? And I said, no, absolutely not. I said,
I didn't want to turn around.
I said, you will lose your real estate license for that, because did Seth have an agency relationship with that buyer?
No, but Travis.
No, the agency relationship was with Trav Talks LLC, which means the commission check has to say what?
Travis
Talks
LLC. And then Trav Talks LLC can distribute that money any way they see fit.
And so just to mention that, because, if it happened, it might have gotten caught. It might have not gotten caught, but I'm not risking my license on a 50-50 chance that it might.
Right.
So
exactly right.
So if the firm was, I know everybody's a one when they're under the firm, but if the firm was to get paid and only one of the agents work with them, would all of your agents, would Leslie get a part of that commission as well?
Again, you're asking TT, you're asking me a question. I think it was TT, right? Was that?
Yeah, that's me.
It's hard to hear. You're asking me a question I can't answer. That's an internal firm policy thing that the Real Estate Commission has nothing to do with. That's like you asking me how much the person flipping hamburgers at McDonald's is getting paid. I don't know. That's between them and McDonald's. All I know is that a Big Mac cost me $4.98 or whatever that number is. Okay. And then I pay McDonald's and then they pay that person, right?
Okay,
they have, and so how they distribute that money internally is entirely up to them. So,
ultimately,
could there be firms that share the commissions? Sure. I don't think there are many of them, but there could be.
It could happen, but ultimately at large, what we're really concerned about looking overhead with that eagle's eye is, where's the money ultimately going?
By the way,
at large,
this setup already exists, and it just occurred to me, you deal with this all the time and you never pay attention. Okay. How many of you have ever paid a tip at a restaurant on your credit card?
Yes.
Who are you paying the tip to, folks?
The restaurant.
Ultimately, the
The
restaurant.
restaurant. And
Mhm.
it is up to them to distribute it however they see fit, whatever their internal policy is on how to distribute those tips. Do some restaurants pool tips?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
serum.
And that is their call,
It's
right?
legal.
Because ultimately you paid the restaurant the tip. Right now, I
Yeah.
realize you can circumvent that by paying cash directly to the server, but I'm just saying when you pay it as part of the bill, you're paying it to the restaurant. How do you really know how it gets distributed once you walk out of the restaurant?
No, but I'm
No.
No, you assume you do, but you don't know. And that is the same of a real estate transaction. When that
Very
money comes
good.
into Trav Talks LLC, what they do with it is their business, and that's their agreement with their agents.
Oh, I love that. That really makes sense for me.
And yeah,
Got it.
if you've ever worked in food service, it does, right? Exactly.
Mhm.
How do we all feel? Pretty good?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So we talked about how clients and customers are not owed the same responsibilities, right? Clients and customers are different. What we want to focus on now is the client, because the truth is customers, we owe them very little. Here's what we owe customers: honesty and fairness. Don't lie. Don't misrepresent things. That's the fancy word for lying in our industry. And be fair to them. That's all we owe to customers. We don't owe them advice, and we don't owe them fighting for their best interest. We just don't. But we owe
Customer.
those are customers. But for our clients, we owe them a lot more.
Everything tonight is what we owe our clients.
This acronym of O.L.D.C.A.R is meant to help you remember the duties that we owe to our clients. And they are obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable skill. We're going to break each one of them down. It's not, don't freak out. You don't have to like try to get it all right here. This is just an overview of what's coming. We're going to talk about each one of them. But these are the duties that we owe to who?
Our clients.
Our clients, not everybody. Here's what's going to be, folks. This is where you got to be careful. It is too easy on a test to just automatically say, oh, yeah, I owe him confidentiality. Because they're going to ask you this question on the test. Grant tells me that he just lost his job and he needs to sell his house very quickly. What am I supposed to do with that information? That's going to be a test question, right? And they're going to have answers that range from you should tell the buyer that Grant's in a bind and he needs to sell quickly, to you should never disclose confidential information. Here's the real answer. It depends.
Who do we represent?
Is Grant my client or is Grant my what?
Customer.
Customer. Because I only owe Grant confidentiality of that information if he is my client, folks. What am I going to do with that information if Grant is my customer? If Grant's my customer,
use it against him.
I'm going to use it against him. I'm going to bury him with it.
You better watch out what you say.
Better. When you're talking to a real estate agent, you better be careful what you say. You better know if you're talking to somebody who represents you or not, because we only owe these duties to our clients. Is everybody okay with that statement before we go on to the individual duties?
Yes. Those are the actual things that we owe to clients. And then something that I just came up with to remember what we only owe to customers is we only owe customers honesty and fairness. The first two letters of customer is CU, so we're just going to give them honesty and fairness and see you later.
Yeah, there you go.
That's it.
If it helps, it helps. But that's it. That's all we owe them, you know. But
all right,
our clients, far more than that. And so the first of them, the O in O.L.D.C.A.R is obedience. And so when we talk about obedience is a word that means follow instructions. So when we say we owe our clients obedience, what does that mean we should do?
Which is an
Obey.
instruction.
Follow their
instructions.
Whatever they say to do.
Even if we think they're doing the stupid thing, do we follow their instructions?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I mean,
Can
I'll give you a perfect example. My seller client on that house, we listed it at $1.25 million. I thought we were bluntly overpriced at $1.25 million. They're just, I thought we were going to be in the 1 million, 1 million, 2 maybe tops range, unless some buyer was just crazy. But I said, okay, well, let's try it. We'll see what we get. You know, we'll see. Well, we get the crazy buyer. We had 10 showings. 9 of them said it was overpriced. The other one comes in with a full price cash offer. What do you think my advice was? If 10 people look at it, 9 say it's overpriced, and 1 brings you a full price cash offer, what do you think my advice was to the seller?
Take that.
Sign it.
Run.
Now. Sign it.
Where's my pen?
But what if the seller had said to me, no, I want you to go back and counter offer with them $100,000 more than list price? What would I do?
Just
You
that.
have to do that.
Think you're crazy, but okay.
I think you're crazy. I think that's a bad idea, but okay. You're the boss. That's what obedience means, folks.
Okay.
You follow their instructions, even when you think the instructions are the wrong things to do. Because ultimately, the decision is not ours. The decision is theirs. Okay. Now, I have to point out a word here that is super important. Lawful. We follow, notice it does not say follow all instructions of our clients. It says follow the lawful instructions of our clients. In other words, if they give us instructions that are illegal, don't follow them. Don't do things that we know that there are laws and rules that prevent us from doing. I don't think your clients are going to tell you to do things like, you know, go out and shoot 15 people in a drive-by shooting. I'm not talking about that kind of an unlawful instruction. At least I hope not. I think, though, you are going to encounter clients who will give you unlawful instructions without realizing that they've given you unlawful instructions. So here's what I mean by that. When you
don't bring any buyers that are people of color.
There you go. There's a perfect example. Or how about if they don't even say it in a nasty way, because they probably know that one's wrong. How about if they just say it if they say it in a less nasty way, like, you know, it'd be real nice if you could find me a nice Hispanic family to buy my house. See, I can't do that for them. Isn't that discrimination in its own right? Even though they said it in a nice way, isn't that discriminatory?
Absolutely.
Right? And so they don't realize they've given me an unlawful command, but I don't follow that command. So it's not an excuse to break the law because your client told you to. Are we all clear on that?
Yes.
Yes.
So be careful about that one. We follow any lawful instructions that our clients give us. I will tell you how you're going to be tested on that. This is a warning. This is coming up on the test. And don't miss this question, because I just think it's too much of a guarantee for it to be there, for you not to pay attention to this right here. Okay. We are not allowed as licensees to disclose anything that is contained in a buyer's offer to any other buyer. Without the permission of the buyer who made the first offer, so I'll give you a real world example. Let's say that Patty brings me an offer on my listing for $900,000.
Oh, Patty.
And Jennifer brings me an offer for $850,000. Everybody with me?
Yes.
And my seller client, Rachel, says, listen, why don't you call Jennifer up and tell her we got an offer higher than hers? First of all, is that likely something you're going to hear from a seller? When you got two offers and one's better than the other, could the seller easily say, well, just let the other one know we got a better offer? Could they do that?
Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
God, yes.
Folks, that is 100% illegal. That is called, there's actually a terminology called shopping offers. It's called shopping offers. I don't think you would ever see the terminology on the test, but you need to know that that is a no-no. We do not ever, and I mean, I don't mean, don't be cute about it either. Don't tell somebody, well, Jennifer, we do have other offers, and I wish I could tell you that yours looks good, but it's not looking good. No. No. Here's what we can disclose about offers to other buyers. We have other offers.
That's it.
That's it. We can't say your offer is the best offer. We can't say your offer is the worst offer. We can't say you're close, you're warm. You can't, no. You can't give them any feedback at all that gives them any sense of what the other offers are. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Right.
Now, here's the way they're going to say that on the test, which I think is funny because it's never going to happen this way in the real world. They're going to say, I can't tell Jennifer what Patty's offer is unless I get Patty's permission. That's technically what the rule says. Don't give away one buyer's offer unless you get their permission to give their offer away. Does that make sense for everybody?
But can you say that one more time?
I can't. So I cannot tell Jennifer what Patty offered unless I get whose permission?
Patty's?
Patty's permission. It's Patty's offer. Patty's the one whose information I'm giving away. So I can't give Jennifer Patty's information unless I have Patty's permission to give it away. Does that make sense for everybody?
Can you share what the consequences would be if you did break that rule?
And would that be the D of the O.L.D.C.A.R, disclosure of information, or confidentiality?
No, this is obedience. This is simply an example of an obedience command that you do not follow. Howard, I'm not sure. How do you mean your question, Howard? Could you?
If you gave up the information of that offer to the second buyer from the first buyer, what would be the consequences? Would you just lose the deal, or would the real estate commission come after you?
Oh, absolutely. The consequences would be suspension of your license, revocation of your license, because it would be a clear license law. And now I get what you're asking. It would be a clear license law violation to do that, because this is meant to prevent a bidding war. Because isn't that exactly, if Rachel tells me to do that, why? Let's get to the root of it. Why does Rachel want me to tell Jennifer, we have an offer that's higher than yours, in the hopes that Jennifer will
bring her offer
to bid up higher.
She will bid higher.
Bid it up.
And here's the thing: if we can do it once, what's to stop there?
Right. It becomes an auction then.
As soon as Jennifer goes higher, then I'm going to contact Patty and say, oh, Patty, we got an offer higher than yours. And I'm just going to bounce them back and forth off of each other. And listen, clearly, if you're the seller, that's what you want to happen, right? And so the seller's going to ask you to do this, and you have to know to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That's not allowed. Because Seth used the right word. What is that called, folks? When people know what other people are bidding and bid more because they want to upset somebody's bid, what is that called?
An auction.
An auction. And folks, you don't have an auctioneer's license. And that's why you're not allowed to do that. If you want to sell property in that manner, you go get not only a real estate license, but an auctioneer's license. That's an auction.
Travis, is it illegal to say, let's say everybody's calling to make their appointment to come in and present their offer or to drop their paperwork off? Is it okay to say, we're expecting a lot of offers, bring your highest and best?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that does not give away the meat. It's the meat we're worried about. You know, if it's fine to tell somebody we have 8 offers. It's fine to tell somebody we have multiple offers. It's fine to tell somebody we have 26 showings and we already have 8 offers. because because here's the thing, that doesn't really tell the buyer much information. For all we know, because here's what the thing, if you tell me you have multiple offers, maybe they're all above list price, or maybe none of them are at list price. I really have no idea. It's when
maybe the broker's just lying and trying to.
Well, hopefully not.
Hopefully not, but
I should not be able to come away from that conversation with any information about where those offers are or what they are, what the contents of them are. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
But now let me tell you why the test answer and the real world answer are kind of a little bit different. You can't do it in either case, but on the test, they're going to say you can't do it unless you get Patty's permission. Here's the real world answer. You can't do it because guess what? Patty ain't giving her permission. You're a dummy if you even ask. What does that conversation sound like? Hey, Patty, thank you for your offer. Listen, we appreciate the offer so much, but here's the deal. We do have another offer, and we'd love your permission to tell them what your offer is. What is she going to say?
Heck to the no. I know why you're telling them.
Are you crazy? No way. No way.
So would you just counter offer the other offers?
Well, you can, what you can say to the seller is, listen, we have other options here. We can ask them for their highest and best offer. We can pick one and counter offer that one. We can respond to, there are a lot of legal avenues there, but the disclosing the terms of an offer is not one of them. Okay. The other thing that we get into trouble with the obedience one, because it's one they test you on, because people get hung up on, well, my client told me to do it. That is a classic excuse with the real estate commission. Well, my client told me to do it. And the commissioner will sit there and go, well, if your client told you to go out there and start selling, cocaine on the sidewalk, I hope you tell them no to that too, because that's illegal,
Right.
This one down here at the bottom, there are going to be some things that your client may not want you to say that you are obligated by law to say. And if it's one of those obligated disclosures, you can't keep it a secret. And I'll give you an example of that. Let's say the roof leaks on the property and you're aware that the roof leaks. It's what we call a material fact. And so even if you represent the best interest of the sellers, you're obligated to disclose that information. Obviously, your seller client is not going to like that you're disclosing to buyers that the roof leaks, but you don't have a choice. So just make sure you understand that this obedience is somewhat limited because we have to stay within the law. Is everybody all right with that?
Honesty and fairness.
Okay. What about honesty and fairness?
Falls under material facts.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've got to talk extensively about material facts. Yeah, right. But yes, that we owe material facts to customers as a part of that honesty and fairness thing. That is true. Okay.
What about after the fact? Like after you're under contract, can you say to another agent, well, you were close, or if they ask? Okay.
No, you're not supposed to ever disclose the terms of people's offers. So even after it closes, what you're supposed to say to them is, well, you can go look it up and see what it closed for. That's public record. And then you'll know if you were close or not. And listen, it's very frustrating because buyers, obviously in this market who don't get their offer accepted, they want to know. They want to know if they were even close. They want to know because they want to know what to do on the next one.
Exactly.
So I get the frustration, but it's just not legally possible.
Okay.
Now, here's what you could do in that case, Rachel. Remember, you can always do it with permission. So in the event that, like, let's just say this. Let's say Coach Fox's house up at Lake Gaston, which is under contract right now. So nobody knows how much it's under contract for. They can see what it was listed for, and they can see it went under contract on the first day. You can pretty much read the tea leaves there, and not many sellers are going to negotiate a lot on day one, right? But people don't know what it's under contract for. Let's say you had another property you were about to put on the market in the same neighborhood, and so you would really like to know what this house is going to sell for. You could call me as a listing agent and say, well, what are you under contract for? And I can't answer that question. But what I could do, if I was really nice, is contact the buyer that's under contract, contact my client, the seller, and say, listen, somebody with another property is curious to know what we're under contract for. Does anybody have any objection to me letting them know? And give them the opportunity to say, because if they both say, I don't care, you can tell them, could I tell this other agent, yep, we're under contract for 1.25 million? Could we do that?
Yes.
As long as we have everybody's permission.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Travis, going back to if the roof leaks. So let's say that you're listing and your clients failed to tell you that the roof does leak, and then
Hold that question, Wendy, because we literally
Okay.
have an hours-long discussion about material facts, and so we don't want to open that can of worms. I mean, it's a big can of worms, and those
3.2.
Plenty of time for those questions. It's a great question, but we need to get there first.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Loyalty. This is the L in the O.L.D.C.A.R. Loyalty is the second of those duties that we owe to our clients. Now, remember, we only owe these duties to clients. We do not owe them to customers, only to clients. Loyalty means always placing the client's interest first. So this would not be true in a transactional brokerage state. Transactional brokers have no loyalty. They look out for themselves. Fiduciary brokers like us are loyal to our clients. That means we would never do anything that is not in the best interest of our client. Don't miss these questions, folks. These questions frustrate me when people miss them, because the answer is so painfully obvious that I just want to shake you when you miss this question. Let's say that Taj goes to a listing presentation and the seller signs a listing agreement with Taj in her office. And the seller indicates that they would like to receive $250,000 as the sales price for the property. They want to list it at $250,000. Everybody with me so far?
Okay.
Taj has been looking for a house for herself in this same neighborhood, and she realizes that this would be a steal at $250,000. Can she make an offer to that seller to purchase that property for $250,000?
Yeah.
No.
No. No.
No.
No. And no. Whose interest is she supposed to be looking out for?
Her client.
Her client. If she knows that price is a steal, what should she be saying to that seller?
You're too low. You need to go up.
You're too low. You're underselling yourself. This is not a fair price. You need to raise your list price. This is not enough money. That's what it means to represent somebody, folks. Don't act in your own best interest. Even if the seller would be happy with $250,000, that's beside the point. It's not our job to make them happy. It's our job to protect them. Does everybody see the difference between those two?
Yes.
So make sure we are exercising loyalty and looking out for the best interest of our clients. Now,
I have a question real quick.
Okay, go ahead, Chantel.
So when we were trying to buy our house, there was a listing agent who had, of course, had a house, and we made an offer almost $30,000 over the asking price because that's how bad we wanted the house. She told us straight up, no, because I have a buyer who is interested in this house and has no wiggle room in their budget, and I don't want to split the commission with your real estate agent. And she wouldn't even give our offer to the listing agent. That was unlawful, correct?
Hold that thought for just a second. I want you.
I know what you're doing.
You know exactly what I'm doing. So this is a website you need to familiarize yourself with, Chantel. And what you're going to do right now, this is in North Carolina, right? Here's what you're going to do right now between now, and I'm going to get confirmation that you've done it before we come back from lunch. You are going to go to ncrec.gov and you are going to scroll down to the bottom of this page. And at the bottom of that page, you are going to click that button right there, right now. And you are going to file a complaint against that agent. And I am going to insist that you do. And I will shepherd that complaint through the process myself if I need to. That cannot happen in our industry. Folks, that is that should not ever happen in our industry. File the complaint. Please, I am begging you. That person should not have a real estate. Can we agree that person should not have a real estate license in the state?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I hope they watch this video.
I do too.
My guess is she's
and I hope they realize it was them that I was talking about in the video when they said that should not happen. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you experienced that. That is brutally awful. But I will tell you, you have all the evidence I would assume it would take to basically hang that person, from a tree somewhere, because
yes, we have it via email.
Well, because here's well, there you go. They put it in email for you. But even if they didn't, you have proof of here's my offer and here's the price the property closed at. Well, if the property closed at a lower price than what you offered, that's an easy conversation for the real estate commission to have with the seller. Why did you accept an offer for $20,000 or $30,000 less than this other offer? And you know what the seller is going to say? Well, we didn't know there was an offer for $20,000 or $30,000. I mean, that just can't happen. That can't.
Basically, the agent did not submit. Is it Tosh? Was it Tosh? Chantel's offer, and you don't do that. You do not determine which offer
the agent
to submit.
The agent essentially tried to protect their own buyer, rather than present all the offers, which is an obligation, and that can't happen. That can't.
We don't determine what's a good or bad offer.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work.
Well, on their behalf.
And I appreciate you sharing that, Chantel. I hate that it happened, but that's the only way
we do too. We love the house.
The reality.
Yeah, she didn't take the offer.
Well, and that's why. See what you just said. It rips at me because we love the house. This does real harm to real people, folks. When we don't do our job correctly, we have harmed the seller in that situation, because how do we know that extra $20,000 or $30,000 isn't the difference between that seller being able to accomplish some life goal of theirs, right? I mean, $20,000 or $30,000, that could be what somebody makes in a year, and we just cheated them out of that on that offer. That's the seller side. But how about the buyer? How about the buyer who missed out on a property that they dreamed of, that they wanted to purchase because we were too arrogant, too whatever, to present their offer and let the seller make their own decision? It's not right. And it's not what agency is about. Agency is about doing what is and that's what this loyalty means. You do what is in the best interest of your client. And so in that case, the listing agent, what would be in the best interest of the seller? To present all the offers to the seller and then allow the seller to decide what. Now, there is no guarantee that the seller would have accepted Chantel's offer. Let's be clear about that. But when they're not even presented the offers, they don't have a chance.
Right.
It just can't happen.
Crazy.
Right.
So wrong.
Can't happen. Yeah, Tyler, that's what Chantel said that basically the agent was trying to protect a buyer who had a limited budget, and they didn't feel that buyer would be able to compete. So they didn't want to present an offer from another buyer that was higher, which is, they're 4-letter words I can't say that come to mind. Yeah, that just drives me nuts. But yeah, ncrec.gov and click the file the complaint button. So
I'm sorry, but that is really sad, because I know when I was buying my home, it was a dream for me. I am, my first homeowner in my whole family that has bought a house. So that would have just made me so sad.
It's awful. It is awful.
Yeah, but
And
luckily we ended up finding a house that is actually worth $409,000, and we only paid $250 because, like Travis said earlier, the listing agent made a mistake of telling my real estate agent that the couple was divorced and just wanted to hurry up and get out of it. So my real estate agent ran with that, and we got a $409,000 house for $250.
Well, I'm glad that worked out, but it still it shouldn't happen. And we
Too
should,
bad, yeah.
because the next time it might not work out so positively for somebody,
We're gonna ask you after lunch if you report them.
Alicia, did you have a question?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, is it Alicia or Alicia?
It's Alicia.
Elisa.
I have kind of a logistical question. So when you are presenting your offers to your client, your seller, do you email them or do you take the time to actually go sit down with them and show them in person?
Most of the time I email them because most of the time what I've done is gone through sort of the standard contract agreement with the seller when we listed the property so that they're familiar with the structure and the layout. And, we talk about the different things they could expect to see in an offer. And then I email them, and then we talk either on the phone or through Zoom or something like that about the individual offer. I try not to wait to present them in person just because timeliness is so important. Now, you remember you got buyers who are hanging with every breath on the other end, and I'm trying to be sensitive to that. I think email is just a much more efficient means. But if I have a seller, I would also say if I have a seller who's more comfortable with me always presenting it in person and going through it, that's exactly what I would do. They're the boss after all.
Okay, so there's nothing wrong with just sending it in an email then?
No, there's nothing wrong with sending it in an email. What would be wrong is sending it without explanation. If you're someone's agent, you owe them, here's the offer, but here's what I think of the offer. You owe them advice about it and, and counsel and guidance. It's not enough just to say, here's the offer, figure it out. That kind of defeats the purpose of having an agent.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious.
Yeah. So let's talk about disclosure for just a second here. Disclosure of information. And this is the D in O.L.D.C.A.R, right? Disclosure of information is probably one of the most important functions that we have in the transaction for our clients. In short, any information that we know that could impact our client's decision, and this gets to what Chantel was just talking about, we owe the client. Did that listing agent owe that seller presenting Chantel's offer? Is that something that the listing agent owed to the seller client?
Yes.
Yes, because it could have easily impacted the seller's decision making. And so we owe our client any and all information that we are aware of, which would potentially impact their decision. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Here's the thing though. I wonder if it really has made sense to you, because I want to highlight something down here. Look at that statement. Do we owe our client spilling the tea on other people in the transaction, the dirt?
Yes.
Do we?
Yes.
I guess so.
You bet we do. If you know it, baby, you better spill it. Because this is your client you're talking about, and you owe them everything.
Yes.
So would that include the example you gave when the guy was like, had a financial budget he was trying to go for? Would that be something you would disclose?
That's exactly right. If I was representing the buyer in a transaction and I found out that the seller had just lost his job and needed to sell quickly, not only can I tell my buyer that information, I must tell my buyer client that information. It's not optional. Everything, when it comes to disclosure and what we owe to our clients, everything we know that could possibly impact their decision, we disclose to them.
Okay. Absolutely.
So I've given you some examples of those things, right? All offers, no matter, and this is another thing they'll do to you on the test. The offer comes in written in lipstick on the back of a cocktail napkin. What do you do with it?
Show it to the client.
You present it. The offer comes in on an outdated contract form. What do?
Present it.
You present it, right? I don't care. The offer comes in for $300,000 below list price. What do?
Present it.
The offer comes in 5 minutes before you're supposed to close
Present
on
it.
the other one that you've been under contract for 6 months.
You better present it.
Present it.
You always present them. And not only that, I'll go one step further. You always make your client aware if somebody says they're even thinking about making an offer. Because if your client's trying to decide, if they've got an offer in front of them and they're trying to decide whether to accept that offer, might it change their decision to know that some other person that just looked at the property that morning is also considering making an offer? Could that weigh on their decision?
Yeah.
Yes, this would be like somebody who had looked at your Coach Fox listing and they had texted you and said, we're thinking about making an offer, and they already know you're under contract. You still let the people know.
We actually had a similar situation before we were under contract. We got that full price cash out. We had 11 showings, 10 on the first day, 1 on the second day before we shut the showings down, early morning on the second day. The people who looked at it early morning on the second day, the agent contacted me back and said, do you have any offers? And I said, I do. I have 1 offer that we're negotiating on. And she said, well, I think my client might want to make an offer. So what do you think I did? I contacted the seller and I said, what?
Look, I know you got a couple other offers, but we have somebody else too thinking about making one.
That the buyer that looked at it this morning has said they're thinking about making an offer. And I went back to the buyer's agent. I said, okay, I've informed the seller that you're thinking about making an offer. Keep in mind, they do have an offer on the table that they're negotiating with. And she said, well, I think we'll know something by Monday. So I went back to the seller and I said, listen, we don't have an offer from them. They've indicated they might be willing to make an offer. They've indicated that if they make an offer, it's going to be 2 days from now. Right. As it is, you have a full price cash offer in front of you. Can I give my advice about what I think they should do in that situation?
Absolutely.
Yes. But what I can't do, folks, is not tell them about the other potential offer. That's not a choice.
Right.
I have to inform them.
And so just kind of like going a little further on that example, you told them that they might be submitted an offer on Monday, but there again, they hired you for advice, for their best representation. What if you didn't give them any advice? They waited till Monday, full price cash offer, revokes their offer, and the one on Monday never even submits one. So it's kind of a two-way street.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Bird in the hand, worth 2 in the bush.
That's right. And that's where the advice comes in, but you give them all the information because you never know how it's going to impact. I've had people say, well, we'll just wait and see, even against my advice, but but it's their choice ultimately.
Absolutely.
So just examples, all offers, if you know anything about the buyers, like who they are, especially, goodness gracious, look at this one right here. Any relationship you may have or any other real estate agent may have to the person bringing them an offer, the person that we're negotiating against. Would that be important information if this is your sister who's making an offer on your listing?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. It'd be very important information if your mom or your dad was to bring an offer from somebody on the listing.
Right.
Your clients need to know that.
They need to know that your advice may be somewhat skewed by that personal relationship. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Okay. So that's super important.
I think that will show up again.
I think so too. Terms that the other party might be willing to agree to. I get this all the time. Don't do this when you're an agent. This is a really bad idea. You're a very poor negotiator if you do this. This happens more often than it should on my listings. An agent will bring me an offer from their buyer, and here's what they'll say. Did you get our offer? Yep, I got it. I'm taking a look at it right now. Oh, well, good. Well, let me know. And if we need to change anything, just let us know. Just come back to us if we need to change anything. Folks, What if they may as well just stamped on top of the damn offer? If we need to change anything, just let us know. If you just let us know. What if they said
Take advantage of us.
their buyer's willing to pay more? You know what they just told me?
Yep.
And guess what I'm going to say to the seller when I present that offer? Well, here's their offer, but I'm pretty sure there's more where that came from because the agent was tripping all over themselves to say basically just come back with another number.
Wow.
Don't do that to your clients, folks. Don't put them in that. But here's the other thing.
Don't show your hand.
And I've had people say, well, I don't like that. I don't like it either. So don't put me in that position. Don't put me in the position of having to throw your client under the bus because you should have never said it to me. Does that make sense for everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm going to do what the law says I have to do for my client. And if you give away the farm, I'm going to tell them.
It's not about what feels right. It's about what is cold, hard right.
That's it. What the law says we have to do. So the other one I will say is definitely going to show up on the test down here at the bottom. We are required to disclose any compensation that we are being paid in the transaction to our clients so that they can weigh if that's influencing our advice. Let me give you a hypothetical situation. Let's say I'm showing properties to a buyer and I show them 3 houses and one of those houses has a $10,000 buyer agent bonus on it. Do you think your buyer client is entitled to know that if they bought that one particular property, you and your firm would make an extra $10,000 on that one particular property? What do y'all think?
Yes.
Yes, because here's what the buyer needs to know. Well, is Seth's advice being like clouded by that extra money? Like,
right.
You know, I mean, when he's telling me that's the best house for me, is that really what he thinks? Or is that related to that $10,000 bonus?
Mm-hmm.
Folks, it's not a comfortable conversation, but it's a conversation we have to have. Because if you think about it, always put yourself in your client's shoes. If you were the buyer, would you want to know?
Absolutely.
Better believe I
Absolutely.
I'd want to know for sure.
And even though this is under disclosure, it almost kind of ties directly back to loyalty. You got to put your client's best interest first.
For sure. For sure. How do we all feel about disclosing information to our clients? Pretty good?
Yes.
Yes. Good. And so this is just a note here. I put a note here that said, this is why it's so important that people never tell real estate agents information before they know who the agent is working for. Because if that agent's not working for you, they can and will do what with that information?
Use it against you.
Use it against you in that transaction. Never tell a real estate agent your personal business unless you have already hired them. Now, if you've hired them, we go back to one of that, we go to the next duty. The next duty is confidentiality. If they've hired us, can they tell us anything they want?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, because if they've hired us, we have to keep their information what?
Confidential.
Private. But if they haven't hired us, do we keep their information confidential?
No.
No. And so that's a big difference. It's a big change in gears from when they're customers to when they're clients, is that confidentiality piece. We only owe our clients confidentiality. Customers, we spill the tea. I will tell y'all, I owe understanding that reference to Seth. I have to say, I'm old. I did not know what.
Yeah, but you gave me crap about it when I first used it.
I did because I had no idea what it means. He comes to me and he's like, I made these for marketing purposes in my neighborhood. What do you think of them? And he brings me this little, and it's a little bag he's made up with a bunch of tea bags and like creamer and stirs and stuff. And it had his business card attached to it. And it said, if you want the tea on your neighborhood, call me. And he's like, what do you think? He's like,
I like it, Seth.
He's like, well, he's asking me what I think of it. And I'm like, well, the bags are cute, but I don't get it. And he's like, damn, you're.
I was so pissed. I was like, I'm like, people will get it.
Yep.
I said, well, you better hope they're younger than me, because I didn't. I didn't get it.
Speaking of that, though, there's been like 5 to 6 listings go up in my neighborhood. I'm like, y'all didn't use my tea?
Exactly.
I'm gonna have to send them out a letter or something to follow up.
That's right.
You gave them the idea to list.
No, that's it.
Yes.
So the A in O.L.D.C.A.R. So just kind of recap. We'll start with obedience, right? What did the L stand for?
Loyalty.
Loyalty. Yep. Well, how about the D?
Disclosure.
Disclosure.
How about the C?
Confidentiality.
Confidentiality.
The A is one of the responsibilities that the Real Estate Commission is most concerned about here, accounting. This deals with guarding money. Folks, here is the general rule. We're going to add some more specifics when we talk about trust account rules specifically in North Carolina. But here is the general way you should approach handling money. And let me define what I mean by handling money. That could be cash. So you deal with cash in a transaction on behalf of your client. That's handling money. How about a check? If a check touches your hands on behalf of a client in a transaction, that's also handling money.
Yes.
How about a money order? Is that handling money?
It's the same.
If anything that can be deposited physically touches your person, that is considered handling money. Are we all good with that?
Yes.
And so whenever we touch money in this business, so this does not deal with like electronic transfers because we don't touch that money. This deals with things like checks and cash and money orders and those kinds of things that physically are touched. The proper way to account for that money, because we have to account. Does it make sense that the Real Estate Commission would want you to be able to show, I got this money on behalf of my client on this date, and I gave it to my client on this date? Does it make sense you need to be able to show that?
Yes, you need to receipt paper trail.
The only way you can have a paper trail of that, folks, is to deposit that money into your own bank account, except not your personal bank account. You need to have, or your office needs to have, an account called a trust account if you are going to handle this money. Anytime that money physically touches the hands of anybody associated with that office, where is the destination for that money without question, folks?
The firm's trust account.
The firm's trust account, the office trust account. You can't. So right here, here's test question. Can Howard take a check from a buyer that's meant to pay a home inspector and hand the check over to the home inspector? Howard's buyer client is having a home inspection done, and the buyer hands Howard the check and says, here, give this to the home inspector at the inspection. Can Howard legally do that?
No.
No, because the only time Howard can handle money for his client is if that check is payable to what account?
Trust account.
The trust account.
Howard's office's trust account. Now, could Howard pay the inspector? Sure, but here's what would have to happen. The buyer would have to write the check to Howard's trust account. Howard would have to deposit the check in Howard's trust account or his office trust account. And then there would have to be another check written out of the trust account to pay the home inspector with. Does that make sense for everybody?
Got it.
You would have to show that paper trail of money going into the trust account and then money being paid out of the trust account. That is the only way we are allowed to handle money on behalf of our clients. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, and something that helped me connect that a couple classes ago is that trust account just acts like a central hub for the paper trail. It's got to go through that hub because if not, we're not going to know if it touched 5 hands.
we would never, money would get lost, it would get
Yeah.
mishandled. We need
Very messy.
we need a clear trail of this money. So the answer is we can always handle this money as long as we're willing to run it through what?
Our trust
The
account.
trusted account.
Our trust account. Now, another thing that they will put on the test, which is sort of a gotcha, not every office will have a trust account. There is no requirement to have a trust account. There's a requirement to have a trust account if you are going to handle money. Can a firm decide that they are not going to offer the service of handling money for their clients?
Sure.
Why not?
Yes. And I can point you to such a firm. Trav Talks LLC does not handle money for our clients. And therefore, we do not have a trust account. Simple as that. We don't have to.
What happens to the money? They just give it directly to the attorney or what?
Directly to the attorney, directly to the seller, directly to their inspectors, we have them send it directly. And here, let me tell you something. This is where electronic payments have made the world a wonderful place, folks, because the need of passing all these checks around has gotten so much less in the time I've been in this business. I mean, there was a time when I first got in this business when I felt like all we did was handle checks for people, right? And so it's just become much less now. You know, as an example, the one I just put under contract last week, there was there's an option fee that was paid directly to the sellers. They wired the money to the sellers. There was a earnest money deposit that went to the closing attorney. It was wired to the closing attorney. I never saw or touched either one of them, and which is great because if I didn't touch it, I'm not what?
Responsible, liable.
Responsible for it. And if the real estate commission ever comes knocking on my door and says, "Hey, we need to see your trust account records," guess what I'm going to tell them?
We don't have a trust account.
I don't have a trust account.
I don't handle money.
I don't handle money for
Right.
my clients. Simple enough, right?
Yes.
That's the trust account rule. So property management, a property manager. What's the number one function of a property manager, folks, on a monthly basis?
Collect
rent.
Rent for,
You think a property manager is going to need to have a trust account?
no, they
Yes.
need to have one.
There's no way around it there. Because forget for a second all the tenant security deposits, which would need to be held in a trust account, but just the monthly collecting of rent. Here's a test question. Summer is a broker property manager who's managing a single family home for a homeowner, and the tenant drops off the monthly rental check, which is made payable directly to the landlord homeowner. Can Summer deposit the check in the landlord homeowner's checking account?
No.
No.
Checking account.
Can't touch money that's made payable anywhere other than what?
A
To the trust account.
Her trust account. She would have to give that check back to the tenant and say, you got to do one of two things. Either send this to the landlord directly, because I can't handle it for you, or you can write a different check payable where?
To the trust account.
To my office's trust account, and then I will pay the landlord from my trust account. That's the only two possible options there, folks.
Just for clarification, Travis, could the landlord have a trust account and Summer deposit it in there?
The landlord could have a trust account, but Summer could not deposit it directly in the landlord's trust account because that is still her handling the money on behalf of, without it going through a brokerage trust account, like her office's trust account. So it would have
to be her trust account.
Right, correct. Unless she's an employee. Now, if she's a salaried employee, that's different. But as a broker, it would have to be her office or a trust account in that name of that nature. Okay.
Thank you.
You need to know these two terms. These are two big terms when it comes to accounting and making sure you don't miss questions that deal with accounting on the test. No conversion and no commingling. Conversion and commingling. These are two terms that are definitely going to come up when it comes to the license exam. So let's talk about what they mean. They both have to do with mishandling money. So that's the first thing to understand. They both have to do with mishandling money, but basically one has to do with you spent somebody else's money. The other one, you have too much money in your trust account. So one of these is not enough money in your trust account, less than you should have. And one of them is more than you should have. And folks, listen to me now. Having more than you should have is not good either. I think people tend to think, oh, well, that's not so bad. At least they didn't steal the money. The real estate commission says it's the same thing because it means you're not properly accounting for the money. You should not have $1 too much or too little in a trust account. Does that make sense for everybody? You should have the exact right amount in a trust account at all times. If you have $10 too much in your trust account, are you commingling or are you converting? What do y'all think?
Commingling.
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 If you have $10 too much in there, you are commingling. That is exactly right.
You're losing my attention because you
Is
seem
commingling
distracted.
also putting trust monies in your personal account? Is that commingling?
No, that would be conversion. Conversion would be putting trust money in your personal account because conversion means you don't have as much money in the trust account as you should. So when you have money that should be in a trust account that's in your personal, that's mixed in with your personal money, that's conversion. When you have money that should be in your personal account in your trust account, that is commingling. So here's a test question. Y'all identify and tell me which one this is. Seth receives a commission check on a closing and deposits it into his firm's brokerage trust account. Is this a proper use of a trust account? Is this conversion? Is this commingling? Or is this, I don't know. We just make up a fourth anything.
Proper use.
Proper use.
Proper use.
This would be commingling.
I'll say it again. Seth has deposited a commission check into his brokerage firm's trust account. Is this proper use of a trust account? Is this conversion or is this commingling?
Proper use.
Proper use.
We understand that it's an improper use, but what's the
No,
term?
I said, is it proper
Commingling.
use?
Oh, proper.
We're saying proper.
It's proper.
It is not proper.
No.
Very much improper. Folks, your trust account,
Commingling.
trust account is not your money. Who does the commission belong to?
Oh,
That's our money.
Yeah.
A commission does not go into your trust account.
I thought you said did you say his trust account or the firm's trust account?
Firm.
Same thing. Same thing. There's only one. He can't have one separate from his firm.
Okay.
Commission, it's his firm's commission, his firm's trust account. That is an improper use of a trust account. No commission of any kind should ever go into a trust account.
I don't have a trust account for my personal funds. That would just be my checking or savings.
That's it.
Okay.
The trust account is there for money we are holding on behalf of who?
The client or
clients and trust
or customers, right? So we are being entrusted with somebody else's money. So which one is that? Is that commingling or is that conversion? Because it's one of the two.
Conversion.
That is commingling because the trust account would have far too
more
much money in the trust account. We have mixed our funds with trust funds.
Technically, when you're putting the money into a trust account and it belongs, and it's not client's money, if you're putting it in the account, you're mixing, you're commingling.
You're mingling the money and it shouldn't mingle. It should not.
What lives in the trust account? Is this due diligence? This is deposit?
Any money that you're holding on, stop trying to be specific about it. And that's your problem. You're trying to be too specific. If it comes from a client or customer, it goes where?
In the trust
account.
In the trust account. Is a commission from a closing money that we're handling for a client or customer, or is that our pay in the transaction?
That's our pay.
Hey,
Our
it's
pay.
ours.
That doesn't go into a trust account
Right.
because we're not guarding that money for somebody else. Does that make sense for everybody? And that's why I have to ask it in that way, because I know where your weak spots are. I'm not trying to make you feel, like, oh my God, I missed that. I'm trying to point out where your weak spots are. I'm trying to put a big flashing hazard sign there that says commissions don't go where?
In the trust account.
In the trust account. That is commingling. Too much money in the trust account. Right? So let's say that somebody drops off a rent check. It is made payable to the office trust account. Seth deposits it in the office trust account, and then we later disperse rent to the landlord. Is that proper use of the trust account? Is that commingling, or is that conversion?
Proper.
That is proper use of the trust account. That's exactly what the trust account is there for. It's money that ultimately belongs to the client, but it's flowing through the firm, so it must flow through the what?
Trust account.
Trust account.
Trust account.
Paper trail.
So what about trust account LLCs has a trust account, and their office rent is placed into the trust account?
So is this, what do you mean?
That's conversion.
Like the office they use for their office space?
No,
Yeah.
they go through they come in directly from Travis Talk business checking account.
That is correct. That's right. That's exactly right.
So don't hold any money for the firm in the trust account either.
That's exactly
No
right.
commission or no
firm,
personal
no
stuff.
commission, no business operating money, only money that is eventually is going to go
Belong
to
to
our
clients.
right? That the eventual destination has to do with our clients. That's what the trust account is for. Okay, everybody good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about when we're talking about trust accounts. And then the last of these, which actually takes the least amount of time to talk about, because we're going to talk about it so much more as we go through the class, is we owe our clients skill. That's that reasonable skill. That's the R in O.L.D.C.A.R. Okay, so reasonable skill. The reasonable part just means like we don't have to know everything, but we do have to reasonably be knowledgeable about the areas in which we practice. This is important because we have a one-size-fits-all real estate license in North Carolina, right?
Yep.
Like Seth, as an example, has a license that allows him to do residential real estate, commercial property management, residential property management, vacation rentals. So as an example, Seth could be engaged legally in the vacation rental business. He has a license. Or timeshare sales. He has a real estate license. Could he sell timeshares?
Sure.
Yeah.
Would it be responsible of him, given that he's never sold a timeshare, to take a client on who has a 600 unit timeshare development and be the primary broker handling that transaction? No. Because just because he has the license to do it does not mean he has the skill necessary to do it. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yeah.
Same thing for as if I was selling residential constantly, but then somebody wants to buy a motel or a hotel.
Right. I mean, I had somebody come to me last year or 2 years ago now. It was right before COVID. Somebody came to me and they said, listen, I need your help on a property down near Clayton. I said, what kind of property? And he said, well, it's a federal cleanup site. I said, what kind of federal cleanup site? He said, well, it's a super fun cleanup site. They used to have hazardous waste on the property, and we're going to get some grants and clean it up and redevelopment. And I looked at him and said, you don't need me to help you with that. And he said, what? No, I mean, you're licensed to do that, right? I said, I might be licensed, but I don't know a thing in the world about a federal super fund cleanup site and hazardous waste and grants to get that redeveloped. You need somebody.
I wouldn't know where to start.
You need somebody who specializes. Do y'all see that is a path to losing your license in a hurry when you take on things that you just don't have a skill level to do? right?
Yes, but I think you, with that example, I know you wouldn't have done it, but you, as an example, could have gone to work for another firm to work under a broker in charge who had the skill, correct?
That is exactly the perfect answer, Howard. If that's something that I thought, okay, I want to do
Okay.
in the future, couldn't I go and find somebody who does already specialize in that and say, listen, I've got a client who wants to do this. I don't know a thing about it. Can we work it together? Can we tag team on this? Can we, could I do that? Absolutely. And that's what you do. When you want to learn a new part of the business, that's exactly what you do.
Or just refer it and get a fee.
Or you could just refer it and get paid if you don't ever, I mean, if I think, and that's what I did. Cause I'm like, not only do I not know anything about a hazardous waste cleanup site, I don't want to know anything about a hazardous waste cleanup site. So I'm just going to refer you to somebody who does and let them take care of you. But if that's something I had wanted to learn and be proficient in, I would have found somebody to work with, and we would share the commission, work out something between us, and then you could learn. But don't take on things, because that is a breach of trust. Remember, this fiduciary relationship is they're supposed to trust us to do what's in their best interest. And so in order to have that level of trust, that we have to only take on the things that we are reasonably skilled at. I can predict some of the things that you're going to be asked as far as skill goes on the test. Most of them will probably relate to, for test taking purposes, with value. And I mentioned this earlier. Giving clients good, reliable information about the value of the property that they are either selling or trying to make an offer on is probably the single biggest piece of advice that we give. And so make sure that you're doing that. If you're not, that would definitely be a breach of our responsibilities to our clients. Because if we can't give them that advice, if we can't advise them on, is this a reasonable price? Is this a reasonable offer? Then really we haven't provided an appropriate sort of level of knowledge and expertise to the transaction. And folks, that sums up the duties that we owe to our clients, which is extensive. It's a lot. But hopefully now that we've been through those, you can kind of start to get a picture of why the job is such a big job. We've got to remember that these people have hired us to look out for their best interest. But don't forget, when taking the test, always ask yourself the most important question. Am I working for this person, or are they simply my customer? Are they my client, or are they my customer? Because if I'm working for them, if they're my client, I do owe them all those duties. If they're a customer, it's a no-go. I don't owe them those duties. So that's a good place, I think, for us to take a lunch break. How does that sound for everybody?